Hey there, tonight we're uncovering the resilient spirit of Aztec warriors as they navigated the tumultuous clash with Spanish conquistadors. Not the Hollywood version, you know, but a saga of cunning strategies and unyielding courage. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now make yourself cozy, maybe adjust your room temperature or get that cup of tea, and let's explore tonight's tale together. The air is thick with the aroma of fresh maize and a bustling energy that echoes through the canals of Tenochtitlan, the heart of the Aztec Empire. It's 1519, and this city is not just any ordinary dot on the map. It's the Venice of the New World, home to roughly 200,000 souls, making it one of the largest cities on the planet. To put it in perspective, London is still struggling to reach 100,000. But here's the kicker. Tenochtitlan is built smack dab in the middle of a lake. Talk about real estate with a view. Now, don't be fooled by any romantic notions of a peaceful paradise. This is a city fueled by tribute, a polite way of saying, give us your stuff, so we don't smash your face in. Neighboring city-states send a steady stream of goods, feathers, cacao, fine textiles, and even human captives for the occasional festive sacrifice. The Aztecs are nothing if not efficient. They've turned warfare into an art form and religion into a motivational poster, except with more blood. Religion is the pulse of this empire, guiding everything from daily chores to deadly battles. The guards are demanding, and they don't accept IOUs. Huitzilopochtli, the sun and war deity, has a particular fondness for human hearts, making the Aztecs the ultimate overachievers in keeping the sun rising. So, the warriors aren't just fighting for land or glory. They're literally battling for the survival of the universe as they see it. Speaking of warriors, let's talk about the rock stars of the Aztec military, the jaguar and eagle warriors. These guys aren't just playing dress-up. Adorned in the pelts of jaguars or the feathers of eagles, they're the elite forces, the Navy SEAL of their day. It's not just about looking fierce, though it certainly helps when you're trying to scare the sandals off your enemies. The jaguar warriors represent the earthly prowess, stealthy and powerful, while the eagle warriors symbolize the sky, striking from above with lethal precision. In the Aztec world, your status in battle could define your entire social standing. Capture enough enemies for sacrifice, and you might find yourself moving up the social ladder faster than you can say, Obsidian Club. But don't get too starry-eyed about the glory of war. It's a brutal business, and there's no health insurance for losing a limb in a skirmish. The warrior culture is a mix of bravery and brutality, honor and horror, a duality that's as mesmerizing as it is terrifying. Now, here's where the story picks up steam. Enter Hernán Cortés, the Spanish conquistador whose name would become infamous. In 1590, he sails in with a motley crew of about 500 Spaniards, a handful of horses, and a couple of cannons. Just a little FYI, the Aztecs have never seen horses before. To them, these creatures look like monsters straight out of a fever dream. And those cannons, let's just say they make quite the impression. Cortés isn't just some bumbling adventurer. He's got ambition that could fill the Gulf of Mexico. His eyes are set on the riches of the Aztec Empire, and he's ready to play every trick in the book, or in his case, the conquistador's manual of deceit and diplomacy. He allies with disgruntled city-states tired of paying tribute to the Aztecs, painting himself as a liberator. What a guy, right? But let's not jump ahead too quickly. This is a world on the brink of collision, a clash of civilizations that will change the course of history. The Aztecs, standing tall in their gleaming city, are about to face an enemy unlike any they've ever known. And Cortés, well, he's about to meet a culture more complex and formidable than he could have imagined. It's a drama of epic proportions, with stakes higher than an Aztec pyramid. So as you stand here, amidst the vibrant chaos of Tenochtitlan, you can feel the tension crackling in the air. Every marketplace haggle, every drumbeat from the temples, every whispered prayer to the gods, carries the weight of 1,000 possibilities. This is a world teetering on the edge, where the past and future are about to collide in ways that neither the Aztecs nor the Spanish could ever predict. Stay tuned, because things are about to get historically hectic. As the sun rises over Tenochtitlan, Casting its golden hue over the sprawling city, let's take a detour across the Atlantic to a place with far less sunshine and far more economic desperation. Spain. Picture this. It's the early 1500, and Spain is like that one friend who's always borrowing money, but somehow still manages to throw lavish parties. The country is neck-deep in debt, and the appeal of the New World is shining brighter than a pirate's lost treasure. Hernan Cortés and his band of merry men weren't just thrill-seekers. They were the original startup founders, looking to cash in on the venture capital of conquest. Cortés himself is a character straight out of a telenovela. Born in 1485 to a modest family in Medellin, Spain, he was supposed to become a lawyer. But let's face it, the courtroom drama couldn't match the allure of untamed jungles and gold-plated cities. Cortés is ambitious, ambition that could put a Wall Street broker to shame. He's got his eye on the Aztec Empire, rumored to be brimming with more wealth than a Silicon Valley IPO. And why not? Back in Spain, the crown was all about the bling, desperately seeking gold to fund its wars and pay off creditors. It was a time when get rich or die trying wasn't just a catchy phrase, but a survival strategy. So, here comes Cortés in 1519, with around 500 men, 16 horses, and a handful of cannons, ready to stake his claim. Let's not romanticize this ragtag crew too much. They weren't knights in shining armor, but more like mercenaries in tarnished mail, each with their own agenda. The Conquistadors were driven by the promise of encomiendas, land grants that essentially turned them into feudal lords in the New World. It was a system that promised riches for the few and ruin for the many. Now, let's talk about their initial meet and greet with the Aztecs. Forget any notions of a diplomatic red carpet. This was more like two cosmic forces colliding. The Spaniards, with their steel armor and thunderous firearms, must have seemed like a walking, talking apocalypse to the Aztec warriors. Horses, of course, added another layer to the nightmare, a new beast that combined speed with an ominous strength, a far cry from the well-behaved deer of the New World. But here's the kicker, the story that the Aztecs thought the Spaniards were guards. That's the kind of myth that makes for a great story but crumbles under scrutiny. Sure, it's tantalizing to imagine Cortés being mistaken for Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent deity, but the Aztecs were no fools. They were skilled diplomats and strategists, well-versed in the art of realpolitik. The idea that they were simply awestruck by these foreign invaders is as believable as a politician's promise. In reality, Moctezuma Roman II, the Aztec emperor, was playing a dangerous game, trying to figure out if these newcomers were friends, foes, or just an elaborate pest. The initial exchanges between the Aztecs and Spaniards were a mix of gifts and glares, a diplomatic dance set to the tune of mutual suspicion. Moctezuma, caught between appeasement and aggression, sent lavish gifts to Cortés, fine textiles, gold, and feathers. But let's not kid ourselves. This wasn't an act of submission. It was more like the ancient world's version of keep your enemies closer. As for Cortés, he played his cards with the finesse of a poker champ. He allied with the Tlaxcalans, fierce rivals of the Aztecs, who saw an opportunity in these strange visitors. This alliance was a game-changer, providing Cortés not just with additional manpower, but valuable intelligence about Aztec strengths and weaknesses. It was a classic divide-and-conquer move, executed with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. But hey, even the best-laid plans can go awry. Cultural misunderstandings were as plentiful as the mosquitoes swarming the swampy landscape. The Spaniards couldn't quite grasp the Aztec cosmology, with its intricate rituals and divine sacrifices. To them, the Aztecs were pagans in need of saving, or rather, subduing. And the Aztecs, they saw the Spaniards as unpredictable and potentially useful, but ultimately a threat to their way of life. Despite the tension, there were moments of bizarre camaraderie. Imagine Spaniards marveling at the market of Tlatelolco, a bustling hub that made European markets look like roadside fruit stands. Here, the Aztecs traded everything from cacao beans to obsidian blades, showcasing an economic sophistication that left the Spaniards both impressed and envious. This was a civilization rich in culture and commerce, a stark contrast to the struggling economies back in Europe. As the days turned into weeks, initial awe gave way to a simmering hostility. Cortés, ever the opportunist, seized the moment, capturing Moctezuma in a daring move that left the emperor a puppet in his own palace. Was it a masterstroke of strategy or a reckless gamble? Either way, it was a turning point, setting the stage for a conflict that would reshape the continent. And so, the plot thickens. The air is electric with anticipation as the Aztecs and Spaniards prepare for a showdown that would echo through the ages. On one side, a mighty empire steeped in tradition and power. On the other, a determined band of outsiders driven by greed and glory. This is history in the making, a tale of ambition, deception, and survival against impassable odds. Stay with us as we unravel the next chapter of this epic saga, where nothing is as it seems and everything hangs in the balance. With the stage set and tensions simmering, it's clear that the Aztecs and Spaniards are headed for a showdown worthy of a historical blockbuster. But before we dive into the tactical playbook, let's take a closer look at how the Aztec warriors, faced with an enemy wielding strange weaponry and unfamiliar creatures, adapted their strategies with both ingenuity and grit. Now, let's talk about the initial shock and awe. When Cortés and his band of European adventurers rolled into view, armed with steel swords and cannons that belched fire and smoke, the Aztecs were, understandably, a bit taken aback. I mean, how often do you see a guy on horseback, looking like an extra from a medieval fantasy, commanding beasts that seemed to merge horse and rider into one terrifying entity? It was as if the Aztecs had stumbled into a live-action version of their worst legends. But if you think the Aztecs just threw up their hands and called it a day, think again. These warriors were no strangers to adversity. They built an empire on the backs of clever tactics and ruthless efficiency. So, when faced with the new challenge, they didn't just panic, they innovated. First off, let's address the elephant, or rather the horse, in the room. The Aztecs had never seen these galloping creatures before, and at first they might have thought the Spanish cavalry was some kind of monstrous centaur. But rather than cower in fear, they quickly learned to target the horses, knowing that dismounting the rider would even the playing field. Talk about learning on the fly. Then there were those intimidating metal suits the Spaniards wore. You could almost hear the Aztecs thinking, all right, so we can't stab through that shiny stuff. No problem, let's go for the exposed bits. And that's exactly what they did. The Aztecs focused on hitting the Spaniards where it hurt, literally, by aiming for the joints and gaps in the armor. It was like playing a lethal game of Operation, but with obsidian blades. Now, the Spaniards had their cannons, which must have seemed like thunderous demons from the underworld. But the Aztecs, ever the quick thinkers, weren't about to let some oversized noisemakers get the better of them. They adapted their formations, spreading out to minimize the impact of those explosive volleys. It was a classic move of divide and conquer, except this time they were dividing themselves to conquer the fear of those booming beasts. As the conflict heated up, the Aztecs also made strategic use of their unique urban landscape. Tenochtitlan, a city of canals and causeways, became a formidable fortress. The narrow paths and waterways were perfect for ambushes and guerrilla tactics, turning the city into a maze that confounded the Spaniards. Imagine fighting in a labyrinth where every corner could hide a warrior ready to pounce. It was home field advantage, Aztec style. But let's not whitewash the situation. Despite their resourcefulness, the Aztecs were fighting an uphill battle. The Spaniards not only had superior weaponry, but also the unwitting assistance of their greatest ally, disease. Smallpox, a silent and ruthless killer, swept through the Aztec population like a grim reaper on a mission. It's estimated that up to 40% of the inhabitants of Tenochtitlan succumbed to the disease, their immune systems defenseless against this foreign scourge. Talk about a brutal twist of fate. And yet, the Aztecs didn't just roll over and accept defeat. They fought with everything they had, even as the odds stacked higher than the pyramids they built. Their resilience was nothing short of legendary, a testament to their determination to defend their home and way of life. All the while, Cortés was playing the political chess game of his life. By forming alliances with disgruntled city-states like the Tlaxcalans, he effectively turned the tide in his favor. It was a bit like showing up to a fight with not just your buddies, but your opponent's enemies too. The Aztecs found themselves encircled not just by Spaniards, but by their own neighbors, a betrayal that stung as much as any sword. The siege of Tenochtitlan was a grueling affair, lasting nearly 3 months. Imagine the sound of constant battle, the clattering of weapons, the cries of soldiers, and the unending tension. It's the kind of scenario that would make even the most seasoned warrior weary. The Aztecs, cut off from supplies and reinforcements, were slowly strangled by the siege. It was a battle of attrition that chipped away at their strength, both physically and psychologically. And yet, the Aztec spirit was unyielding. Even as food supplies dwindled and disease ravaged the populace, they defended their city with a ferocity born of desperation and pride. Every street, every alley became a battleground as the Aztecs held out against the encroaching forces. It was a fight not just for survival, but for the soul of their civilization. As the siege wore on, it became clear that the fall of Tenochtitlan was inevitable. But in those final days, the Aztecs demonstrated a resilience that defied the odds. Their resistance was more than just a military effort. It was a statement of identity, a refusal to be erased by the tides of history. And as the city finally succumbed, collapsing under the weight of its own grandeur and the relentless assault of its foes, the Aztecs left a legacy of courage and tenacity that would echo through the ages. In the end, the fall of Tenochtitlan wasn't just the end of a city. It was the dawn of a new era, a seismic shift in the balance of power that reshaped the continent. The Spanish victory, aided by alliances, luck, and the devastating impact of disease, was a turning point that marked the beginning of a new chapter in the story of the Americas. But our tale is far from over. The Aztecs may have lost their city, but their spirit endured, woven into the fabric of history. As we look forward to the next chapter, we'll explore how the aftermath of this epic clash set the stage for the complex tapestry of cultural exchange and conflict that followed. Stay tuned, because the saga of conquest and resilience is just getting started. In the aftermath of Tenochtitlan's fall, the dust settled, but the story was far from over. Imagine the scene. The once mighty city now a ragged shadow of its former glory, its canals clogged with debris, its temples scarred by cannon fire. Yet beneath the rubble and ruin, the spirit of the Aztec people flickered on, stubborn and unyielding. Let's dig into how some Aztec warriors managed to avoid total obliteration. We're talking about the unsung heroes who adapted like chameleons in a jungle of chaos. While Hernan Cortés and his conquistadors were busy high-fiving over their so-called victory, many Aztec warriors were already plotting their next move. These guys didn't just slink away into the shadows. They transformed themselves into guerrilla fighters, using their intimate knowledge of the terrain to launch surprise attacks. Picture a game of hide and seek, but with obsidian blades and survival on the line. Leverage local knowledge. Check. Retreat strategically. Double check. These warriors and their leaders were masters of both, exploiting the dense terrain and hidden paths of the region to their advantage. They knew every nook and cranny like the back of their hand, or perhaps like the hilt of a macuahuitl, their razor-sharp wooden club studded with obsidian blades. They didn't need GPS. They were the human equivalent, setting traps and launching ambushes that kept the Spaniards on their toes. But let's not romanticize it too much. This wasn't a swashbuckling adventure. The Aztecs were fighting a losing battle against a technologically superior foe aided by disease and betrayal. Yet, in their defiance, they preserved a piece of their culture, turning guerrilla warfare into a form of cultural resistance. Their tactics were less about winning back their empire and more about asserting their continued existence in a rapidly changing world. Now, about those social and cultural shifts post-conquest. The Spanish weren't about to let a good warrior go to waste, so they incorporated these seasoned fighters into their own ranks. It's like the corporate world, snapping up a rival's best employees after a hostile takeover. Aztec warriors found themselves in a strange new world, where their skills were valued, but their identity was in question. Many were absorbed into the colonial framework, serving as auxiliary troops in further Spanish exploits. Talk about a career pivot. This integration wasn't just pragmatism on the Spaniards' part. It was a necessity. The Spanish crown, always on the hunt for more gold and glory, needed manpower to sustain its sprawling empire, and who better than the battle-hardened Aztecs? It was a testament to the Aztecs' resilience and adaptability, qualities that would echo through generations. Of course, this wasn't a fairy tale ending. The blending of cultures was a complicated, often brutal process. The Aztecs were compelled to adopt new religions, languages, and social structures. The Catholic Church swept through like a divine broom, replacing temples with cathedrals, while Spanish became the lingua franca of the land. Yet beneath the surface, traditional beliefs and practices persisted, like whispers in the wind. The Aztecs might have been conquered, but their culture was far from erased. In time, these changes gave rise to a mestizo culture, a fusion of indigenous and Spanish influences. This new identity was as complex as it was inevitable, a testament to the enduring legacies of Aztec strategies and resilience. It's a narrative of survival, adaptation, and transformation, where the lines between conqueror and conquered blur over time. And what about the enduring legacies of their strategies? Well, the tactics honed in the chaos of conquest found their way into the military playbooks of later generations. The guerrilla warfare that started as a desperate act of survival became a powerful tool in the centuries to come, inspiring resistance movements across the globe. The Aztecs, in their defiance, left a legacy that transcended their fall. This story of defeat and survival is one of the many layers in the rich tapestry of history, a saga that reminds us of the tenacity of the human spirit. The Aztecs may have lost their empire, but they gained something perhaps more profound, a place in the annals of history as a symbol of resilience and cultural endurance. As we draw this part of the tale to a close, we're left with a landscape forever altered by the clash of civilizations. The Aztec warriors, their strategies, and their adaptability serve as a poignant reminder that history is not just about who wins or loses, but about the stories we tell and the legacies we leave behind. And trust me, this story is far from finished. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the threads of this epic saga, where the echoes of the past still reverberate in the present. As we wrap up this saga, it's time to ponder the aftermath of the Aztec-Spanish clash, and how this epic encounter left its indelible mark on both cultures. Picture a world where the echoes of obsidian blades and cannon fire still resonate, reshaping identities and narratives centuries after the dust settled. The Aztec Empire may have crumbled, but its legacy has proved as resilient as its warriors. Now, let's start by tackling a particularly stubborn myth, the idea that the Aztecs simply rolled over, awestruck by the Spanish might. Sure, the Spaniards had superior weaponry and a knack for strategic alliances, but the notion that they marched through Mexico like a hot knife through butter is as believable as a fish riding a bicycle. In reality, the Aztecs fought tooth and nail, displaying a tenacity that would put a pit bull to shame. Their downfall was a cocktail of misfortune, disease, internal dissent, and yes, those pesky conquistadors with their steel and gunpowder. The Spanish, on the other hand, weren't just the conquering heroes of a colonial fairy tale. They were opportunistic, exploiting the Aztecs' complex web of alliances and enmities. Hernán Cortés wasn't a knight in shining armor. He was a man with debts to pay and a crown to impress. His victory was as much about savvy politicking as it was about brute force. The legacy of this conquest isn't a straightforward tale of good versus evil. It's a messy saga of ambition, betrayal, and survival. But let's talk about the economic and social ripple effects of this clash. The Spanish conquest triggered a seismic shift in the New World's economic landscape. Gone were the days of tribute-driven Aztec economy, replaced by the encomienda system, a sort of medieval fiefdom on steroids. Spanish land grants effectively turned indigenous communities into labor pools for European landowners. This was not your friendly neighborhood bake sale. It was a brutal reorganization of society that prioritized gold, silver, and other resources for the Spanish crown. The consequences were devastating. Indigenous populations plummeted, not just from warfare and forced labor, but from diseases that spread like wildfire. Yet amidst this turmoil, a new cultural identity began to emerge. The mestizo culture, born from the mingling of Spanish and indigenous peoples, became a cornerstone of Latin American identity. It's a complex tapestry woven from threads of resistance and adaptation. The Spanish brought Catholicism, but indigenous beliefs persisted, interwoven into new religious practices. Language, too, evolved, with Spanish becoming dominant, but Nahuatl and other indigenous tongues surviving as a testament to the enduring spirit of the Aztecs. Now, let's address the myth that the Aztecs were merely passive victims of history. While they were indeed conquered, their influence didn't just vanish in a puff of smoke. In fact, many aspects of Aztec life and culture were adopted by the Spanish. The Aztec calendar, for instance, was so sophisticated that it influenced the way time was measured in the colonies. Even the vibrant markets of Tlatelolco left an impression, introducing Europeans to goods and trade practices they hadn't seen before. Fast forward to today, and you'll find that the legacy of this clash still lingers in the cultural and historical memory of Mexico and beyond. The story of the Aztecs and their fall is taught in schools, not just as a tale of defeat, but as a narrative of resilience. It's a chapter of history that defies simple categorization, offering lessons in cultural survival and adaptation. The clash between Aztecs and Spaniards is a reminder of the complexities of identity and the enduring power of cultural fusion. In modern times, this narrative has been revisited and reinterpreted, sometimes romanticized, sometimes scrutinized. It's a story that has been shaped and reshaped to reflect the ever-evolving understanding of history and identity. The Aztec-Spanish encounter serves as a potent symbol of cultural collision and coalescence, a reminder that history is not a static record, but a living dialogue between past and present. So, what lessons can we draw from this historical tapestry? For one, it's a testament to the human spirit's ability to adapt and endure in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. It reminds us that history is rarely black and white. It's more like a kaleidoscope of colors, each hue representing a different perspective or experience. The clash of cultures might have been brutal, but it also gave birth to new identities and narratives that continue to shape our world. In conclusion, the Aztec-Spanish clash wasn't just a cataclysmic event confined to the annals of history. It's a living story, echoing through time, shaping cultural identities and historical memory. It's a saga of resilience, adaptation, and transformation, a reminder that even in the face of conquest, the human spirit endures. So, as we close the book on this chapter, remember that history isn't just about the past. It's about understanding who we are today and who we might become tomorrow. And that, dear listeners, is the legacy of the Aztecs and Spaniards, a testament to the power of history to inform, inspire, and illuminate the complexities of the human experience. The sun's barely made its debut over the grand skyline of Tenochtitlan, but your day as an Aztec priest is already in full swing. The air vibrates with the hum of life, like a city-sized hive where everyone knows their role. You, being the spiritual VIP, make your way to the Templo Mayor, the beating heart of this metropolis built on an island in Lake Texcoco. This isn't just any neighborhood altar. It's a colossal pyramid dedicated to Huitzilopochtli and Tlaloc. And trust me, these gods are no small potatoes. They're the rock stars of the Aztec pantheon. As you approach, you get that familiar mix of awe and dread. All because this place is a masterpiece of engineering and faith. Dread because today's to-do list is longer than Montezuma's reach. You've got sacrifices to oversee, maize offerings to bless, and a meticulous calendar to consult that'll make you wish for the simplicity of today's digital planners. Speaking of maize, let's talk corn. Forget about your morning cornflakes. Maize is the real MVP here. This crop isn't just a food source. It's the celestial gift that keeps the divine and the earthly worlds spinning in harmony. Every carb is a symbol of life, and you're tasked with ensuring the gods get their fair share. It's not just crunch and munch. It's a ritualistic exchange. You're the intermediary, the postal service between humans and gods, making sure the cosmic balance isn't thrown off by a missed delivery. As you join the throng of worshippers and fellow priests, the scene is one of organized chaos. Traders are setting up stalls, exchanging everything from cocoa beans to jaguar pelts, the latter being the high fashion statement of the 15th century. You can almost hear the clinking of cacao beans, the currency that oils the wheels of this vast economic machine. Man, talk about a city that runs on chocolate. Now, let's get into this calendar business. The Aztecs didn't just scribble down dates on papyrus. No, sir. They crafted a 260-day ritual calendar and a 365-day solar calendar. These bad boys interlock every 52 years, like some cosmic Rubik's Cube. Your day's agenda is dictated by this intricate system, leaving you little room for spontaneity. Forget weekends off. Your life is a perpetual cycle of ceremonies and calculations, ensuring that the stars and the gods are in perfect alignment. Walking through the marketplace, you're reminded of Tenochtitlan's economic prowess. The tribute system is the backbone of this empire. Think of it as a grand-scale Amazon Prime, where city-states pay their dues in goods to keep the empire's wheels turning. From the lush valleys come avocados and tomatoes, while the coastal regions send treasures from the sea. This isn't just trade. It's the lifeline that feeds the city's opulence and your temple's coffers. But let's cut through the romanticized haze of priesthood. Sure, being a priest sounds like a cushy gig, spiritual enlightenment, community respect, the works. But really, it's like being a high-stakes diplomat, balancing the demands of gods and humans. Political maneuvering is as much a part of your job as lighting incense. You're not just a man of faith, you're a player in the power games that define Tenochtitlan. As you arrive at the temple steps, you can't help but admire the artistry around you. Sculptures of gods and mythical creatures decorate the walls, each a testament to skilled artisans who were, quite literally, building their way into history. But before you get too lost in appreciation, you remember there's a ceremony to prep. It's time to don your priestly garb and step into the role of mediator between this world and the next. From your vantage point atop the Templo Mayor, you're treated to a panoramic view of the city's sprawling expanse. Canals crisscross like veins, pulsing with canoes ferrying goods and people. The soundscape is a symphony of bartering voices, splashing water, and the occasional squawk from a macor. This city, with its estimated population of 200,000, is an urban marvel that rivals any metropolis of its time. You reflect on the sheer human effort required to build such a place. Tenochtitlan didn't just pop up overnight. It was a labor of love, sweat, and let's face it, a fair amount of coercion. The canals alone are a testament to the Aztec knack for innovation. They're not just functional, they're lifelines, bringing in goods from every corner of the empire. Standing here, you can't help but ponder the myths that swirl around your priestly role. There's a certain allure to the idea of priests as serene keepers of wisdom, perched above the fray. But the reality is a bit more gritty. You're part of a machine that blends spirituality with politics, where every decision impacts the city's delicate balance. Miss a ritual, and it's not just the guards who'll be displeased. There's a political fallout to consider. As the morning rituals commence, you're in the thick of it, performing the sacred tasks that keep Tenochtitlan's heart beating. It's an intricate dance of incense, chants, and offerings. But you're not just going through the motions. Each act is a deliberate nod to the gods, a reminder of the interconnectedness of all things. In this world, everything is a cycle, from the cornfields to the celestial bodies above. So, as you wrap up the morning ceremonies, you take a moment to breathe it all in. The weight of history, the pulse of the city, and the cosmic dance you're a part of. It's all in a day's work for an Aztec priest, where myth and reality are forever entwined in the vibrant tapestry of Tenochtitlan. And just like that, you find yourself transitioning into the midday beat of Tenochtitlan, the sun now blazing down on this urban marvel. As you step down from the Templo Mayor, let's pivot to the social hierarchy, the real-life game of chutes and ladders that dictates every Aztec's place in the world. In the grand pecking order of Tenochtitlan, priests like you occupy a pretty cushy perch. Forget about the modern-day hustle where everyone's an influencer. Back then, being a priest was the ultimate gig. Spiritual authority, political clout, and no small amount of swag. Robes that make you look like you've stepped out of a divine catalog. But don't let that fool you into thinking it was all divine intervention and celestial insight. This wasn't Hogwarts. You weren't casting spells with a flick of your wrist. No, your power came from a keen understanding of ritual, tradition, and let's face it, a bit of theatrical flair. Your responsibilities are a smorgasbord of celestial admin work. You're expected to conduct ceremonies, interpret omens, and manage the delicate dance of sacrifice. It's a full-time job, minus the 401k. And speaking of sacrifice, let's tackle that elephant in the room, shall we? The Aztecs have a bit of a reputation. Okay, a massive reputation for human sacrifice. But it's not just a bloodthirsty free-for-all. There's a method to the madness, a dark economic and political calculus at play. Sacrifices were about more than appeasing the gods. They were a way to reinforce the power of the state. Think of it as a macabre performance art, designed to demonstrate the emperor's ability to control life and death itself. In the high-stakes game of empire building, sacrifice was both a religious duty and a political maneuver. It was the ultimate flex, a reminder of the state's dominance both on Earth and in the heavens. The idea wasn't just to shed blood, but to create a spectacle that affirmed Tenochtitlan's place in the cosmic order. Now, you might be asking, did the priests wield mystical powers, or were they just skilled public speakers with a knack for showmanship? Spoiler alert, it's the latter. You're more akin to an ancient PR agent than a wizard. You're the voice that interprets the God's will, ensuring everyone from the Emperor to the commoner knows their place in the great cosmic jigsaw puzzle. And let's not forget the omens. Ah, the omens. Reading them is less about prophetic skill and more about understanding the cultural lexicon of the time. It's not unlike reading the stock market, chaotic, unpredictable, and prone to the occasional crash. The role of the priesthood is deeply entwined with the fabric of Aztec society. From birth to death, every stage of life is marked by rituals that you oversee. Whether it's blessing newborns or ensuring the recently deceased are properly equipped for the afterlife, you're the one holding the cosmic clipboard, checking off divine tadas. It's a role that demands precision and an uncanny ability to read both the stars and the room. Now, let's debunk another myth while we're at it. The notion of priests as serene, mystical figures floating above the earthly fray is a romanticized fairy tale. In reality, your life is a constant negotiation between spiritual duty and earthly power. The priesthood is a political entity as much as a religious one. Every ceremony you conduct, every omen you interpret, has ripple effects that can make or break alliances, influence trade, and even determine wars. It's a delicate balancing act where a misstep can lead to trouble that not even the gods can save you from. As the midday sun kisses the city's canals, you head toward the marketplace for a much-needed break. The air is thick with the scent of chili and cacao, the chatter of traders hawking their wares, and the ever-present hum of commerce. It's a scene that underscores the economic engine driving Tenochtitlan. Here, the tribute system is in full swing, a testament to the empire's reach and influence. City-states far and wide send their offerings, ensuring the capital remains awash in luxury, and you, by extension, have all the ceremonial accoutrements you need. While you walk among the bustling stalls, it's hard not to marvel at the sheer scale of it all. The Aztec economy is a finely tuned machine, a complex web of tribute, trade, and taxation. From the vibrant feathers of tropical birds to the precious stones mined from distant lands, everything has its place in this vast economic tapestry. And let's not overlook the cacao beans. Those tiny, bitter seeds are worth their weight in gold, quite literally the currency of the time. But let's steer clear of the allure of romantic history for a moment. The reality is, all this wealth and opulence come with strings attached. The tribute system is a double-edged sword, fuels the empire, but also sows seeds of discontent among the conquered city-states. Rebellion simmers just beneath the surface, kept in check by the emperor's iron fist and the strategic use of fear, sacrifice being a key component of that strategy. It's a stark reminder that power, no matter how divine, is always precarious. As the sun begins its slow descent, casting long shadows over the city, you prepare for the afternoon's duties. There are more ceremonies to conduct, more omens to interpret, and perhaps even a sacrificial rite to oversee. It's a relentless cycle, this life of a priest, one where divine inspiration must constantly compete with earthly demands. But in the grand scheme of things, you're a crucial cog in the Aztec machine, a mediator between worlds, ensuring both the gods and the city remain in harmony. So there you have it, a glimpse into the complex world of the Aztec priesthood. It's a life of balance, where myth and reality intertwine in ways that are both awe-inspiring and, at times, brutally pragmatic. But as you well know, it's all part of the cosmic dance, a dance that, for now, must continue. Stay tuned, because this historical journey through Tenochtitlan is far from over. As the afternoon sun casts its golden glow over Tenochtitlan, the city's frenetic energy takes on a more cerebral tone. It's time to dig into the intellectual side of being an Aztec priest, starting with your alma mater, the Carmacac School. Forget ivy-covered walls and collegiate dorm rooms. This is where the future leaders of the empire are hammered into shape with the finesse of a master craftsman. The Carmacac is not your average educational institution. Think of it as a blend of a military academy, a seminary, and a political training ground. It's where you learn the ropes of theology, astronomy, and the fine art of rhetoric. And let me tell you, the curriculum is as rigorous as it is diverse. Here, the stars aren't just twinkling lights. They're celestial clocks that dictate everything from planting seasons to war strategies. Astronomy, for instance, isn't just about stargazing. It's a high-stakes game of cosmic chess. The priests are the grandmasters, deciphering the celestial patterns that guide the empire's fate. You'd spend hours poring over codices, those ancient tomes filled with colorful glyphs and complex calculations. The Aztecs had a knack for numbers that would make any modern mathematician blush. Their understanding of the universe was both profound and practical, with a 365-day solar calendar that rivals today's Gregorian precision. But let's not romanticize this as some idyllic pursuit of knowledge. The education at Carmacac came with a hefty price tag, both literally and metaphorically. The tuition, your unwavering allegiance to the state. The pressure to conform to the empire's worldview was immense. Think of it as ancient indoctrination with a side of astronomy. You learn to read the stars, sure, but you also learn to read the political landscape, ensuring your place in the social hierarchy. Then there's theology. In the Carmacac, you didn't just study the gods, you became an agent of their will. The pantheon wasn't a distant collection of mythical beings. They were active participants in daily life. You were trained to interpret their desires, a role that demanded both reverence and a touch of skepticism. After all, divine messages were as much about political expediency as they were about spiritual enlightenment. And let's not forget rhetoric, the art of persuasion. This wasn't just about giving grand speeches. It was about mastering the subtleties of influence and control. You learned to wield words like weapons, a skill that would serve you well in the political machinations of Tenochtitlan. In a society where every word could sway an empire, the ability to speak persuasively was as valuable as any military skill. But the Carmacac wasn't just about filling your head with knowledge. It was about shaping you into a cog in the empire's ideological machine. The pressure to conform was relentless. Every lesson, every ritual, was designed to align you with the state's vision. It was about creating a unified identity, a sense of purpose that transcended individual desires. In this school, you were molded into a vessel for the state's ambitions, your personal beliefs subsumed by the greater good. The cost of this education wasn't just ideological. It was a commitment that demanded your full devotion. Long hours, rigorous rituals, and the constant scrutiny of your peers and superiors. It was a high-pressure environment where failure wasn't just a personal setback, but a threat to the state's stability. The stakes were high, and the margin for error was razor-thin. The Carmacac was a crucible, forging the leaders who would steer the empire through turbulent times. It was a place where myth and reality collided, where the romantic allure of divine knowledge was tempered by the harsh realities of political power. But despite the pressure, or perhaps because of it, the Carmacac produced some of the most influential figures in Aztec history. So here you are, a product of this intense educational system, standing at the intersection of knowledge and power. You've been trained to see the world through the eyes of the gods and the eyes of the state. It's a duality that defines your role as a priest, a mediator between the divine and the mundane, a keeper of cosmic secrets and earthly truths. As the afternoon unfolds, you reflect on the path that led you here. The Carmacac was a defining chapter in your life, a place where you learn not just about the stars and the gods, but about the intricate dance of power and belief. It's a journey that continues to shape your every action, every decision, in this vibrant tapestry of Tenochtitlan. Yet, as you look toward the horizon, you know there's more to explore, more to understand in this complex world. The lessons of the Carmacac are just the beginning, a foundation for the ongoing dance between myth and reality, between the cosmic and the earthly. Stay tuned, because the story of Tenochtitlan is far from over. The city is alive with possibilities, each one waiting to unfold in the chapters ahead. As the sun dips below the horizon, painting Tenochtitlan in shades of amber and shadow, it's time to dive headfirst into the intricate dance of politics and religion that defines your world. The city may glitter like a gem on Lake Texcoco, but beneath its dazzling surface lies a complex web of power plays and divine mandates. Welcome to the evening shift of an Aztec priest, where spiritual guidance meets the Machiavellian art of statecraft. Let's get one thing straight. The Aztec Empire didn't just run on maize and blood sacrifices. It was a well-oiled machine powered by a potent mix of religion and politics. The priesthood was the engine room, ensuring everything ran smoothly, or at least appeared to. Your role as a priest isn't just about chanting and incense. It's about navigating the treacherous waters of power dynamics. You're both a spiritual guide and a political advisor, a man who walks the tightrope between celestial mandates and earthly ambitions. At the heart of this balancing act is the concept of divine kingship. The Emperor, or Huey T. Latoni, isn't just a political leader. He's the earthly embodiment of the God's will. His authority is steeped in religious legitimacy, and you, as a priest, are the linchpin that connects his rule to the divine. It's a brilliant setup. What better way to cement power than by claiming it's ordained by the heavens? It's like having a direct line to the cosmic customer service desk, except complaints aren't exactly welcomed. But here's the kicker. The divine right to rule isn't just handed out like candy at a festival. It has to be constantly reinforced through rituals and ceremonies that you, dear priest, orchestrate. Your job is to ensure that the Emperor's divine favor is as undeniable as the sun's rise each morning. Miss a beat, and it's not just the guards who might get irked. The political stability of Tenochtitlan hangs in the balance. Now, let's talk political intrigue, the kind that would make even House of Cards look like child's play. In this world, your priestly duties are inextricably linked to the Empire's power struggles. The priesthood isn't just a spiritual institution, it's a political powerhouse. You're a key player in the Emperor's inner circle, advising on everything from military campaigns to diplomatic relations. The stakes are high, and the margin for error is non-existent. The priesthood's influence extends beyond the palace walls. You're deeply embedded in the city's social fabric, wielding considerable clout over the populace. Your words carry weight, shaping public opinion and ensuring the Emperor's policies are not just accepted, but revered. In a society where religion and politics are two sides of the same coin, your role is as much about persuasion as it is about piety. But let's not sugarcoat it. Being a priest is as much about ambition as it is about duty. You're constantly navigating a minefield of rivalries and alliances, each step a calculated move in the game of power. It's a world where loyalty is fluid, and allegiances can shift as swiftly as the winds over Lake Texcoco. The Emperor may be the ultimate authority, but even he must tread carefully, knowing that the priesthood holds the keys to his divine legitimacy. And then there are the omens, those enigmatic messages from the guards that can make or break political fortunes. As a priest, you're the interpreter of these celestial communiques, a role that bestows both power and peril. Your interpretations can sway the course of empires, but they can also draw you into the crosshairs of political machinations. It's a high-wire act where a single misstep could send you tumbling from grace. Now, let's dispel a few romantic myths about the priesthood. The idea that priests are serene, otherworldly figures floating above the fray is a charming fiction. In reality, you're entrenched in the gritty business of governance, your days filled with the push and pull of political tides. The priesthood is a political entity in its own right, wielding influence and authority that rival even the emperors. It's a delicate dance of power and piety, where spiritual duties are often overshadowed by political necessity. As dusk settles over Tenochtitlan, the city comes alive with the sounds of evening rituals and whispered conversations in palace corridors. It's a reminder that in this world, religion is not just a personal belief, but a state apparatus, a tool of governance as vital as any army or treasury. The priesthood is the linchpin, ensuring the empire's divine mandate is unwavering and unchallenged. And there you have it, the complex reality of being an Aztec priest in 15th century Tenochtitlan. It's a life of constant negotiation, where the lines between myth and reality, divine will and political ambition are forever blurred. As you prepare for the evening ceremonies, you're reminded that the cosmic dance is far from over. In this city of gods and men, the story is still unfolding, each chapter more intricate than the last. Stay tuned, because this historical journey is only just beginning. The vibrant tapestry of Tenochtitlan is rich with tales yet untold. As the city finally settles into the hushed embrace of night, you, the Aztec priest, find yourself reflecting on the day's events and your role in this grand tapestry of gods and men. It's a privilege, sure, but one that comes with a fair share of existential baggage. The myths surrounding your priesthood paint a picture of serene wisdom and celestial insight, a comforting illusion that's easier to market than the gritty day-to-day realities. But let's strip away the romance and get down to brass tacks. First off, the notion of the priesthood as a purely spiritual calling is a charming but simplistic narrative. while you do engage in spiritual practices, chanting, incense wafting, and the like. There's no denying that politics and spirituality are as intertwined as vines on a trellis. Your position is as much about navigating the labyrinth of power as it is about interpreting divine will. In fact, it's more Game of Thrones than Book of Psalms. The political undercurrents are relentless, and the stakes high enough to make your blood pressure spike just thinking about it. But let's not kid ourselves. The allure of being seen as a conduit to the gods is intoxicating. In a society where celestial endorsement is the ultimate badge of authority, your role as a priest elevates you to a status that's both revered and feared. It's a double-edged sword, and the cuts aren't always clean. You're a figurehead in a system that thrives on spectacle, where the line between genuine belief and political theater is as blurred as the stars on a foggy night. Now, let's talk legacy. What does Tenochtitlan leave behind after the sun sets on this empire? For starters, it's a testament to human ingenuity and ambition. Built on a lake, the city defied the natural order, transforming inhospitable terrain into a thriving urban hub. With an estimated 200,000 residents at its peak, it rivaled European capitals in size and sophistication. The city's legacy isn't just architectural, it's cultural too. The Aztecs' contributions to agriculture, art, and astronomy are as enduring as the pyramids they left behind. Yet, Tenochtitlan's story isn't all triumph. The tribute system, while a stroke of logistical genius, sowed seeds of discontent that would eventually sprout into rebellion. The city's opulence was built on the backs of conquered peoples, a fact that complicates its narrative of grandeur. It's a reminder that every coin has two sides, one polished, the other tarnished by the weight of history. As for you, the human side of being a priest is a balancing act worthy of the finest acrobat. You're caught between the celestial and the terrestrial, between spiritual duties and personal convictions. Do you genuinely believe in the omens you interpret, or is it all a performance to maintain the status quo? It's a question that gnaws at the edges of your conscience. The pressure to conform to the state's narrative is immense, and stepping out of line isn't just risky, it's potentially catastrophic. But here's the real kicker. How has the narrative of conquest shaped our understanding of Aztec religion? The Spanish conquest, with its tales of bloodthirsty rituals and heathen gods, has cast a long shadow over the legacy of Tenochtitlan. The conquerors wrote the history books, and let's face it, they weren't exactly unbiased scribes. The reality is far more nuanced than the black and white depictions of savagery and superstition. The rituals, often misunderstood and sensationalized, were complex ceremonies with layers of social, political, and spiritual meaning. Yet, beneath the layers of myth and propaganda, certain truths remain. The Aztecs were a society deeply connected to their cosmology, their rituals an intricate dance with the divine. The priesthood was both a spiritual and political institution, a duality that reflected the complexities of a civilization at its zenith. The conquest may have obscured these truths, but they persist, like echoes in the chambers of history, waiting to be heard by those willing to listen. So, as Tenochtitlan settles into the embrace of night, you find yourself pondering these complexities. The myths may endure, but so do the truths hidden beneath their surface. Your role as a priest, as a mediator between worlds, speaks to the timeless human quest for meaning and connection. It's a reminder that history isn't just a series of events, but a tapestry of human experiences, each thread a story, each knot a lesson. And there you have it, the end of a day in the life of an Aztec priest, where myth and reality intertwine in a dance as intricate as the stars above. As you prepare to rest, you carry the weight of history on your shoulders, a burden and a privilege that few can claim. Tomorrow, the cycle begins anew, but for now, the city sleeps, its legacy secure in the annals of time. If you've ever wondered what an ancient empire harped up on ambition, innovation, and a bit of granite looked like, let me introduce you to the Chola Dynasty. These folks weren't just dabbling in empire building. They were the real deal from around 850 CE. Picture a dynasty that sprinted through history with a swagger you could only liken to a rock band on a world tour, minus the groupies, but with a whole lot of temples. Now, let's talk about the headliner of this historical gig, Rajaraja Chola I. Think of him as the Steve Jobs of temple construction, minus the turtleneck, but with architectural blueprints that would make even the most seasoned builders do a double take. In a world where most rulers were satisfied with a decent palace and a few statues, Raja decided to crank the volume up to 11 and aim for the heavens, literally. His reign from 985 to 1014 CE marked a golden era where the Cholas were rolling in wealth, thanks to their savvy maritime trade. Imagine an empire with the monopoly board all to themselves, collecting ships instead of railroads and spices instead of hotels. The economic engine behind all this architectural ambition was fueled by a bustling trade network. The Cholas were experts at playing the international market, sending out ships that carried everything from spices to textiles, all while raking in the kind of cash that would make even modern CEOs envious. This financial windfall was what allowed Raja to embark on his temple-building spree, leaving behind structures so grand they practically scream, "Look at us, we're kind of a big deal." Speaking of big deals, let's talk about the Brihadiswara Temple, a project that kicked off around 1003 CE. This wasn't just any temple, it was the architectural equivalent of a mic drop. Constructed in the city of Thanjavur, this marvel was built to honor Lord Shiva, but let's be real, it was also a sky-high testament to Raja's own ego. The logistics of moving 130,000 tons of granite without cranes or modern machinery. That's a feat that would send today's civil engineers packing their calculators and heading for the hills. No cranes, no bulldozers, no problem. The Cholas had something better, human ingenuity and a workforce that could probably bench press a small mountain. They rolled these massive stones over several kilometers using nothing but muscle, logs, and a lot of determination. It's rumored they even constructed a giant ramp stretching over 6 kilometers long to hoist the stones into place. Talk about taking the phrase, "go big or go home," to a whole new level. But why did all this matter? Well, the Cholas weren't just stacking stones for the fun of it. These temples were not only religious centers, but also hubs of economic and cultural activity. They were the ancient world's version of a cultural and economic power plant, radiating influence and drawing people from all over. In a way, Raja's building projects were like ancient marketing campaigns, broadcasting the Chola brand across the Indian subcontinent and beyond. Let's not get too swept away by the romance of it all, though. While these projects were architectural marvels, they were also massive exercises in power projection. The grandeur of these temples wasn't just about devotion. It was a very public declaration of Raja's dominance, a towering message carved in stone that said, "The Cholas are here, and we're not going anywhere." For the people who toiled to build these structures, the reality was likely less about divine inspiration and more about back-breaking labor and the whims of a king with a vision. So, as we dig deeper into the story of the Cholas, remember this. They weren't just building temples, they were crafting legacies. And like any good legacy, it came with its fair share of myths, truths, and a whole lot of granite. Now, let's zoom in on the Brihadiswara temple construction, a project so audacious it makes building a skyscraper with Legos seem like a rainy day activity for toddlers. Picture an army of artisans and laborers, thousands strong, who probably didn't have dental insurance but had plenty of calluses. These folks weren't just chiseling away at rocks. They were crafting a lasting legacy under the scorching sun of Thanjavur, circa 1003 CE. Imagine the scene. A bustling hive of human activity, with workers heaving granite blocks that weighed as much as a blue whale, all without a single computer or crane in sight. It's like assembling the world's largest IKEA set without the instruction manual. The engineering marvels of this architectural feat are the stuff of legends. The temple's massive dome, known as the Vimana, stands at an impressive 216 feet tall, a height that would make it the tallest structure in India for centuries. Hoist the dome's crowning stone, a capstone weighing around 80 tons, Raja Chola's engineers constructed a ramp that stretched 6 kilometers long. That's longer than a marathon, folks. Talk about a commitment to cardio. But how did they pull off this Herculean task? Well, it wasn't magic, although it feels like it. The Cholas had mastered the art of lever and pulley systems, utilizing basic physics to move mountains, or in this case, colossal granite slabs. The workforce likely consisted of skilled artisans, stone masons, and laborers who knew their craft like the back of their calloused hands. These were the unsung heroes of the era, the ones who, despite the lack of modern amenities and health benefits, tirelessly shaped the stones into intricate sculptures and towering walls. Let's not sugarcoat this, though. The workforce probably faced back-breaking labor and grueling conditions. The romantic notion of artisans joyfully chipping away at stone is, let's be honest, a bit optimistic. The reality was sweat, toil, and the stern oversight of supervisors ensuring the king's grand vision didn't crumble into chaos. But what drove these workers? Aside from the orders of a powerful king, it was also the promise of a spiritual reward, a belief that constructing a temple was a sacred duty that could secure their place in the afterlife. Now, let's talk about the social dynamics and the PR spin. This temple wasn't just a spiritual center, it was a colossal power play on the global stage. Raja Chola wasn't just building a temple, he was erecting a monument that declared to the world, the Cholas are a force to be reckoned with. It was ancient branding at its finest. The temple served as a cultural beacon, attracting scholars, artists, and traders from far and wide. It was like the Times Square of its time, minus the neon lights, but with plenty of divine flair. Moreover, the temple was an economic powerhouse, a hub of activity that boosted local trade and commerce. Pilgrims and visitors brought wealth and goods, creating a thriving marketplace around the sacred site. This wasn't just a place of worship. It was a bustling center of economic and cultural exchange. Raja's vision was to make the Chola Empire not just a regional power, but a global influencer, and the Brihadiswara Temple was his magnum opus in this grand strategy. And what about the myths? Oh, they abound. Stories of divine intervention, of stones that floated into place with supernatural ease. While these tales add a dash of magic to the narrative, the truth is far more human, a testament to the ingenuity and determination of the people who labored beneath the hot Indian sun. The temple stands as a reminder of what humanity can achieve when driven by ambition, faith, and a healthy dose of imperial ego. As we delve deeper into the story of the Cholas and their architectural wonders, remember that these temples were more than just stone and mortar. They were statements of power, hubs of culture, and engines of economic growth. They were the ancient world's megaphones, broadcasting the might and majesty of the Chola Empire across oceans and continents. And while the grandeur of these structures might inspire awe, it's the stories of the people who built them, their struggles, triumphs, and human spirit that truly bring history to life. So, stay tuned as we continue to explore the fascinating saga of the Chola dynasty and their monumental legacy. Now, as we shift gears from the monumental marvel of the Brihadiswara Temple, let's wade into the less glamorous but equally vital world of Chola architectural innovations, their irrigation systems and urban planning. Sure, temples might get the spotlight, but ask any farmer or city planner, and they'll tell you that water management is where the real magic happens. The Cholas pulled off feats of engineering that would make any modern hydrologist tip their hat. Picture this, rivers that didn't just meander aimlessly, but were harnessed with a precision that would make a Swiss watchmaker proud. The Cholas constructed an intricate network of canals, tanks, and reservoirs that were the lifeblood of their agrarian economy. Take the Grand Anicut, or Kalani, for instance. Built by the legendary Karakala Chola around the 2nd century CE, this ancient dam stands as one of the oldest water diversion structures in the world, stretching 329 meters across the Kaveri River. It was a stroke of genius that redirected water to irrigate thousands of acres of farmland. Imagine a structure that's been around for nearly 2 millennia and is still doing its job. That's not just engineering, that's wizardry. But why all this fuss over water? Well, in the world of the Cholas, agriculture was king. Water meant crops, and crops meant food, wealth, and stability. These irrigation systems were the backbone of the Chola economy, turning the region into a veritable breadbasket. It was a simple equation. Control the water, control the food, control the kingdom. The Cholas understood this centuries before modern governments started debating water rights over conference tables. And let's not forget urban planning. The Cholas weren't just slapping down buildings willy-nilly. Their cities were masterclasses in organization, with planned streets, drainage systems, and public spaces that would make today's urban planners swoon. These weren't just places to live. They were thriving centers of commerce and culture. The city of Urea, for example, served as a bustling trade hub long before Raja decided to play architectural one-upmanship with his temples. Now, speaking of one-upmanship, let's turn our gaze to Gangekanda Chalapuram. If Brihadiswara Temple was Raja's mic drop, then Gangekanda Chalapuram was his son Rajendra Chola's encore performance. Built to celebrate his victorious campaign up north to the Ganges, this city was the Cholas saying, "Oh, you thought we were done. Think again." Completed in 1035 CE, it wasn't just about size, although it was certainly grand. It was about making a statement. The temple here wasn't just a religious center. It was a declaration of Rajendra's imperial power and his ability to bring the sacred waters of the Ganges to his empire, literally and symbolically. The Gangekanda Chalapuram temple mirrored the grandeur of its cousin in Thanjavur, with its immense Vimana towering over the landscape. But it also had its unique charm. A lion-headed well, for instance, a piece of architectural flair that probably made the neighbors a bit envious. And let's not forget the site's strategic location, carefully chosen to serve as the new capital, a move that shifted the epicenter of power and control in the Chola Empire. Economically, these projects were not just about looking pretty or stroking royal egos. They were investments in the empire's future. These grand constructions boosted local economies by creating jobs and attracting pilgrims and traders. The influx of people brought new ideas, goods, and wealth, turning cities into melting pots of culture and commerce. It was a win-win situation, except for the laborers who bore the brunt of the work, of course. And then there's the myth-busting. Sure, stories of divine intervention and stones that flew into place with a whisper from the gods sound great, but let's face it, these were human achievements. Achievements born from sweat, ingenuity, and a bit of coercion from rulers who knew the power of a grand vision. The reality was that these architectural wonders were built on the backs of thousands who toiled tirelessly, driven by the promise of a better life, or perhaps the watchful eye of their overseers. In the grand tapestry of history, the Cholas weren't just stacking bricks and calling it a day. They were crafting a narrative, a legacy that stretched far beyond their reign. These innovations in architecture and urban planning were more than just vanity projects. They were the infrastructure of an empire that understood the importance of cultural and economic capital. The Cholas weren't just building for themselves. They were building for future generations, ensuring their place in the annals of history. As we continue to explore the saga of the Chola dynasty, remember this. Behind every grand facade is a story of ambition, power, and the human spirit. The Cholas may have been kings and conquerors, but they were also visionaries who saw the world not just as it was, but as it could be. So, stay tuned as we delve deeper into the story of this remarkable dynasty and the legacy they left behind. A legacy carved in stone, etched in water, and written in the annals of history. Speaking of legacies carved in stone, let's pivot to the Chola temples themselves. These weren't your average stone buildings. These were the social media darlings of their day, only without the need for filters. You could say the Cholas invented architecture that breaks the internet long before hashtags were a thing. If you were an artisan in the Chola era, your work was basically the Renaissance Instagram feed, full of intricate sculptures, exquisite carvings, and enough religious symbolism to make even the most devout monk double tap. The Brihadiswara temple, for example, not just a testament to Raja Chola's architectural ambition, but was also a canvas of religious storytelling. Every inch of the temple walls was adorned with detailed carvings depicting tales from Hindu mythology. This wasn't just a place of worship. It was a 3D storybook made of granite, with intricate depictions that would make a modern comic book artist weep with envy. From the serene expressions of deities to the dramatic scenes of cosmic battles, these carvings brought to life the rich tapestry of Hindu lore and belief. But why go to such lengths? Well, in a pre-literate society, temples served as the primary medium for religious education. They were the original PowerPoint presentations, only carved into stone and designed to last for eternity. The sculptures weren't just artistic embellishments. They were visual sermons, teaching the masses about morality, cosmology, and divine order. And let's be honest, they were also a bit of a flex, a way for the Cholas to say, look at our gods, look at our power, now look at how awesome we are. Now, as much as we love a good myth, it's important to dissect the legends surrounding these temples. The Cholas were masters of self-promotion, and they knew the power of a good story. Inscriptions found within the temple walls reveal a dynasty that was as much about PR as it was about piety. These inscriptions, often etched in Tamil and Sanskrit, were the medieval equivalent of a press release, singing the praises of the king and his accomplishments. One such inscription reads, "Raja Raja, the king who conquered his enemies, erected this temple and made the gods smile." Talk about a humble brag. And let's not forget the economic incentives that came bundled with these grandiose projects. The temples were also tax shelters, quite literally. Lands donated to temples were often exempt from taxation, making them attractive investments for the wealthy. Inscriptions often record such donations, turning these sacred sites into financial havens that attracted patrons like bees to honey. It's like the Cholas invented the first tax-deductible donations, only with a divine twist. But here's where the plot thickens. The influence of Chola architecture didn't just stop at the borders of their empire. These temples set the blueprint for Hindu temple architecture across South India and even Southeast Asia. They were the OG trendsetters, with their architectural style echoing in the temples of Cambodia, Indonesia, and beyond. The Chola temples weren't just places of worship. They were cultural exports, spreading the visual and spiritual ethos of Tamil architecture far and wide. It's as if the Cholas had their own version of the Silk Road, only instead of spices and silk, they were trading in stone and sanctity. However, let's not get too swept away by the romance of it all. For every divine narrative, there's a gritty reality lurking beneath the surface. The sheer scale and ambition of these projects required an immense labor force, tens of thousands of workers who weren't exactly volunteering out of the goodness of their hearts. These were conscripted laborers, artisans, and masons working under harsh conditions. The myth of divine intervention and floating stones. A nice story for the tourists, but the reality was sweat, toil, and a fair bit of coercion. And then there's the matter of cost. These temples weren't exactly built on a shoestring budget. They were massive economic undertakings that required resources from across the empire. The logistics of sourcing and transporting materials, feeding a workforce, and maintaining the site were staggering. It's like organizing a perpetual music festival where the headliner is a stone deity and the crowd is a mix of pilgrims and traders. In the end, these temples were more than just religious monuments. They were the Cholas' way of stamping their mark on history. They were statements of power, centers of culture, and engines of economic growth. And while the grandeur of these structures might inspire awe, it's the stories of the people who built them, their struggles, their triumphs, and their indomitable spirit that truly bring history to life. As we continue our journey through the Chola dynasty's achievements, remember that behind every grand facade is a story woven with ambition, power, and a touch of human ingenuity. The Cholas may have been kings and conquerors, but they were also visionaries who saw the world not just as it was, but as it could be. So, stay tuned as we delve deeper into the saga of this remarkable dynasty and the legacy they left behind, a legacy carved in stone, etched in water, and written in the annals of history. Ah, the Chola dynasty, a name that echoes through the corridors of history like a catchy tune you can't get out of your head. But before we hit the final notes of this epic saga, let's talk about the monumental legacy these ancient rock stars left behind. Spoiler alert, it's more than just a bunch of impressive temples. The Cholas weren't just about stacking stones, they were about stacking significance. Their architectural feats, from the towering vimanas to the ingenious irrigation systems, weren't mere vanity projects. These were the building blocks of a civilization that understood the power of infrastructure as a tool for empire durability. The Chola temples, for instance, weren't just places for spiritual enlightenment. They were the heartbeats of their communities, humming with economic and cultural vitality. These temples were like ancient megamalls, offering everything from spiritual solace to economic stimulus. They were destinations for pilgrims who doubled as tourists, boosting local economies as they sought divine favor. It's as if the Cholas anticipated the economic principle of supply and demand centuries before Adam Smith ever picked up a quill. Talk about being ahead of your time. Now, the Chola legacy isn't just etched in the stones of Tamil Nadu. It's sprinkled across South Asia, like a trail of cultural breadcrumbs. Their architectural style, a blend of Dravidian and unique Chola elements, influenced temple construction far beyond their borders. Take a stroll through the Angkor Wat complex in Cambodia or the temples of Bali, and you'll see echoes of Chola craftsmanship whispering through the corridors. These structures weren't just religious monuments. They were cultural exports, spreading the Chola aesthetic across continents like an ancient architectural franchise. But let's not get too misty-eyed. The romantic image of the Cholas as benevolent builders needs a reality check. Sure, they left behind jaw-dropping monuments, but let's be clear. Empire building was no walk in the park. It was a gritty endeavor that required more than just artistic vision. It demanded the kind of ruthless efficiency that would make a corporate raider blush. The Cholas were empire builders, not just dreamers with chisels and a penchant for granite. Building these colossal structures required a workforce that didn't exactly clock out at 5 p.m. Thousands of laborers toiled under the watchful eyes of overseers who were more about quotas than quality of life. It was less about divine inspiration and more about human perspiration. The myth of floating stones and divine intervention, a nice bedtime story, but the real magic was all about physics and brute force. Those benevolent builders had a knack for mobilizing resources, both human and material, with a precision that would make a logistics manager nod in approval. And then there's the economic angle. The Cholas were savvy operators, turning their architectural projects into economic engines that powered a thriving trade network. By establishing temples as economic hubs, they created a system where religion and commerce waltzed together in perfect harmony. These sites drew merchants and artisans like moths to a flame, sparking a vibrant marketplace that enriched the empire. It's the kind of synergy that modern economists dream about. As for the ruins that stand today, they offer more than just Instagrammable backdrops. They're time capsules, whispering stories of a bygone era to anyone willing to listen. They tell of a time when architectural ambition reached for the sky, when engineering feats defied the limitations of technology, and when power was carved in stone for all the world to see. The Brihadiswarar temple with its towering Vimana still shouts, "Look at us, we were kind of a big deal," even as it stands silently in the sun. In the end, the Chola architectural legacy is a testament to human ambition, both the glorious and the gritty. It's a story of visionaries who dared to dream big, of empires that understood the power of cultural capital, and of people who labored under the weight of history to create something enduring. The Cholas may have faded into the annals of history, but their influence lingers, a testament to the enduring appeal of their monumental achievements. And let's not forget the modern-day pilgrims, tourists, historians, and yes, the occasional lost YouTuber, all drawn to these ancient sites like moths to a 1,000-year-old flame. These monuments continue to captivate, not just because they're relics of the past, but because they tell a story of human endeavor that resonates through the ages. They speak of a time when stone was more than just stone. It was a canvas for power, a testament to faith, and a legacy that time could not erase. So, as we wrap up our journey through the Chola dynasty's architectural wonders, remember this. Behind every stone lies a story, behind every myth a kernel of truth. The Cholas may have been kings and conquerors, but they were also architects of dreams, crafting a legacy that continues to inspire wonder and awe. And in the grand tapestry of history, that's a legacy worth celebrating. The sun barely peeks over the horizon, casting a pale light that barely qualifies as morning. But there you are, already wide-eyed and ready to swing a sword in 16th century Japan. Forget about hitting snooze or scrolling through a feed. Your day starts with the metallic clang of swords and the bark of your instructor's commands. Welcome to samurai training, where the only meditation you'll get is focusing on not losing a limb. As you grip your katana, the weight of it feels anything but poetic. This isn't some lightweight replica you'd find hanging on a teenager's wall. This is the real deal, forged with the kind of craftsmanship that took weeks, sometimes months. The blade itself is the product of folding and hammering steel, a process so precise it's like origami with a side of lethal intent. And you thought getting up early was your biggest problem today. The first exercise is a series of strikes and blocks, a dance of violence that has been passed down for generations. The elegance of it is undeniable, but let's be honest, elegance is a luxury. You're here to learn how to survive in a world where elegance often takes a backseat to staying alive. Welcome to Sengoku, Japan, Literally warring states period, where peace is as rare as a snowflake in July. The country is a patchwork of fiefdoms, each ruled by its own warlord, or daimyo, and all of them are itching for a fight. War isn't just a possibility, it's practically a certainty. Your training isn't just about wielding a sword, it's about understanding the value of what you're holding. Speaking of value, let's talk armor. You think designer clothes are expensive? Try wearing a suit of armor that costs as much as a luxury car. In today's terms, that's a cool $100,000 or more. And unlike that car, this isn't something you can just buy off the rack. It's custom-made, fitted to your body, and designed to deflect arrows, swords, and the occasional spear. It's both your lifeline and your status symbol, because in this world, what you wear can be the difference between life and death. But let's not get too carried away with romantic notions of noble warriors in shining armor. The reality is, being a samurai is as much about economics as it is about honor. You belong to a class that is expensive to maintain. Your daimyo invests in you, and in return, you owe loyalty and service. Fail to deliver, and well, let's just say the consequences aren't pretty. As you practice, you're also acutely aware of the political climate. The Sengoku period is a time when alliances shift faster than you can say betrayal. Samurai aren't just fighters. They're pawns in a much larger game. An adept warrior is also a shrewd diplomat, because today's ally could be tomorrow's enemy. It's not just about skill with a sword. It's about navigating a world where the only constant is change. All this before breakfast. Speaking of which, after your morning drill, it's time for a meal that would make a modern dietitian's head spin. Rice, pickled vegetables, maybe some fish if you're lucky. The samurai diet is about fuel, not flavor. You're not here to savor, you're here to sustain. It's tempting to think of the samurai as lone wolves, but that's another myth. You're part of a community, a social order that demands mutual respect and obedience. The Bushido Code is your compass, guiding your actions and decisions. It's a strict set of rules that dictate everything from how you conduct yourself in battle to how you treat your peers. It's a code that elevates duty above life, which sounds noble until you realize it might require you to give up that very life. So, as you finish up your breakfast and prepare for the day's lessons, remember that being a samurai isn't just about swinging a sword. It's about understanding the delicate balance of power, the economic demands of your position, and the ever-present shadow of political intrigue. You are the embodiment of a tradition that is as demanding as it is deadly. But hey, at least you look cool doing it, right? As the clatter of breakfast dishes fades into the background, you swap your katana for a brush and ink. Welcome to the mid-morning session of samurai training, where cerebral muscle flexing takes center stage. If you think being a samurai is all about slicing and dicing, think again. This is the era where brains are as valuable as brawn, and your mental training is as meticulously planned as any sword drill. Let's tackle the myth of the samurai as mere fighters. Sure, they could chop a melon in midair with a katana, but they also had the intellectual chops to match. Samurai were educated in literature, philosophy, and strategy. If you were only swinging swords all day, you'd be as one-dimensional as a pancake. Nope, your day is filled with lessons that would make a liberal arts student weep with envy. First up is literature, and let's talk about haiku. Ah, the haiku. 3 lines and a 5-7-5 syllable structure that capture the essence of a moment. In the 16th century, crafting a haiku was akin to dropping a pithy Instagram quote. You're capturing fleeting beauty in a way that says, "Look at me, I'm deep." Just imagine scribbling lines that might read like, "Cicada song fades / a blade of grass stands alone / summer moon watches." It's no Pulitzer, but it makes you sound profound at dinner parties. But samurai poetry wasn't just about showing off. It was a reflection of Zen Buddhism's influence, emphasizing simplicity and the beauty of impermanence. Zen monks could teach a masterclass in mindfulness long before it became a buzzword. They preached the art of being present and finding enlightenment in the mundane. For a samurai, Zen wasn't just a philosophy, it was a survival tactic. In a world where tomorrow's sunrise wasn't guaranteed, finding peace in the present was a skill worth mastering. Next on the docket is strategy. Your lessons dive into the art of war by Sun Tzu, written way back in the 5th century BC. Yes, it was ancient even by your standards, but its relevance was timeless. You're learning that war is as much about deception and psychology as it is about brute force. All warfare is based on deception. Writes Sun Tzu, a line that resonates like an ancient mic drop. In the Sengoku period, understanding strategy wasn't just about winning battles. It was about outsmarting your opponents in this high-stakes chess game of life and death. Now, let's zoom out and look at the socio-political landscape that affects your everyday life. You live in a world governed by the feudal system, a hierarchy that makes the modern corporate ladder look like a playground slide. Your family's rank dictates your privileges and responsibilities. If you're born into a high-ranking samurai family, congratulations. You get the metaphorical silver spoon, along with all the duties that come with it. Your life is a balancing act of privilege and expectation, where the weight of your ancestors' achievements sits on your shoulders like a very stylish, but very heavy cloak. But what if you're not so fortunate? Well, then you're navigating a maze of socio-political hurdles. Your opportunities for climbing the ranks are limited, and your life is a testament to the harsh truth that not all samurai were created equal. The feudal system is a rigid hierarchy, and upward mobility is as rare as a unicorn at a horse race. Your loyalty and service to your daimyo might earn you a pat on the back, but breaking through the class ceiling, good luck with that. This system isn't just about power, it's about survival. Each daimyo rules over their own fiefdom, an area of land granted in exchange for military service. It's a quid pro quo arrangement that keeps the wheels of war churning. Fail to provide service, and you're out, literally. Your land can be taken, your status revoked. It's a high-stakes game where loyalty is currency and betrayal is always just a handshake away. So there you are, a samurai student absorbing philosophy, literature, and strategy like a sponge. You're navigating a world that demands you be part warrior, part scholar, and full-time diplomat. As you ink your last haiku for the day, remember that the true art of being a samurai is balancing these roles like a seasoned tightrope walker. And while the romantic image of the samurai endures, the reality is as complex as it is captivating. As the ink dries, you can't help but feel that in this world, wisdom is as sharp as any blade. As the ink dries on your latest haiku, your stomach reminds you it's time for lunch. And oh, what a feast it is, if you consider a bowl of rice, some pickled veggies, and perhaps a sliver of fish a feast. But hey, this is 16th century Japan, not a Michelin-starred restaurant. Your diet is all about fuel, not flavor, and staying battle-ready takes precedence over culinary indulgence. Let's unravel the samurai diet, which seems to have anticipated the modern obsession with clean eating. Rice is the star of this gastronomic show, and it's not just any rice. This is polished white rice, the kind that screams status and refinement. In a world where whole grains are for peasants and livestock, your rice is as polished as your katana. It's a symbol of wealth, a staple that powers your every move, both on and off the battlefield. As for protein, fish is more than just a side dish. Thanks to Japan being an island nation, fish is the go-to source of protein. Forget about steaks or burgers, your omega-3 intake is top-notch. If you're lucky, you might feast on a slice of salted salmon or mackerel, but let's not get carried away. This is more sushi-grade sustenance than gourmet delight. Now about those veggies. Surprise! Your plate is greener than you might expect. While meat is a luxury, vegetables are plentiful. Daikon radishes, burdock roots, and seaweed fill your bowl, offering much-needed vitamins and nutrients. It's like the samurai version of a superfood salad, minus the Instagrammable presentation. These greens aren't just food, they are survival. But how do you feed an entire army with this fare? That's where logistics become a martial art of their own. Imagine supplying thousands of warriors with enough rice to keep them marching and fighting. It's a task that requires more foresight than a psychic heartline. Rice isn't just a crop. It's a currency, a unit of measure, and the backbone of the samurai economy. In fact, rice production is a feat of agricultural engineering on par with building a pyramid. The daimyo, those regional warlords with more ambition than sense, rely on peasants to till the fields and keep the rice coming. These farmers are the unsung heroes of your samurai saga, toiling away to sustain the war machine. Without them, you're just a hungry warrior with a fancy sword and nowhere to swing it. And let's talk numbers. A samurai stipend might be measured in koku, a unit representing enough rice to feed one person for a year, about 150 kilograms if you're counting. A moderately successful samurai might be allotted 200 koku annually, while the daimyo swim in wealth. controlling thousands of koku. It's a rice-fueled hierarchy that keeps the wheels of power turning and the warriors fed. But rice isn't just about sustenance, it's about scale. Feeding an army requires more than a few fields of grain. It's an operation that involves entire villages, networks of trade, and enough storage to make your local grain silo look like a shed. The logistics are mind-boggling, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Fail to supply your troops. The consequences are as grim as a battlefield at dusk. The role of trade can't be overstated. Samurai households aren't isolated fortresses. They're hubs of commerce. Rice, fish, and other essentials move through a web of trade routes that crisscross the archipelago. Merchants, often regarded with a mix of suspicion and necessity, are the lifeblood of this system. Their wagons and ships bring goods from distant lands, ensuring that your lunch remains more than a distant dream. Trade links connect you to a wider world, bringing in luxuries like silk, ceramics, and even weaponry. It's a reminder that even a self-contained warrior class is part of a larger economic ecosystem. You may wield a sword, but it's the peasant farmer and the merchant who ensure you have the strength to lift it. And speaking of peasants, let's dispel another myth. These aren't just faceless masses toiling in the fields. They are the backbone of the samurai economy, providing the food and resources that sustain your status. Without them, your armor is just shiny scrap metal, and your sword is a decorative stick. It's a relationship of mutual dependency, even if the power dynamic isn't exactly equitable. The peasant's role is as crucial as it is overlooked. They are the ones who plant, harvest, and process the rice that fuels your every move. It's a reminder that the samurai class, despite its aura of self-sufficiency, is part of a complex societal tapestry. Every strike of the sword is backed by the labor of countless hands, making the notion of a lone warrior a romantic, but ultimately flawed, fantasy. As you finish your meal, consider this. The samurai lifestyle isn't just about martial prowess or intellectual achievement. It's a delicate balance of power, economy, and society, where every grain of rice and every ounce of fish is a testament to the intricate web of human effort. Your lunch is more than sustenance. It's a slice of history, a reminder that even the mightiest warrior relies on the humblest farmer. In the world of the samurai, every bite is a nod to the past and a step toward survival. With lunch behind you, it's time to trade your rice bowl for reins. Welcome to the afternoon session of samurai training, where the ground beneath your feet is replaced by the rhythmic thud of hooves. Riding into battle isn't just a matter of jumping on a horse and galloping off into the sunset. It's an art form, especially when you're decked out in armor that could double as a set of medieval free weights. Let's talk armor, the samurai's second skin. If you think kitting up for a football game is intense, try suiting up in a full set of samurai armor. We're talking about 30 kilograms of iron, leather, and lacquer, designed to turn you into a walking fortress. But all that protection comes at a cost, and I don't mean the kind you can measure in koku. This armor was a marvel of engineering, custom-fitted to each warrior, and as you might imagine, it had a significant impact on mobility. Moving in samurai armor is like trying to dance in a suit of tin cans. Each piece is meticulously crafted, with overlapping iron plates, known as lameli, that provide flexibility, but also make you feel like you're wielding a suit of armor in a game of Twister. The kabuto, or helmet, might be your crowning glory, but it's as heavy as a bowling ball. You're not just wearing armor, you're wearing the medieval version of a gym membership. Yet this clunky getup serves a vital purpose. In battle, it's not just about swinging a sword. It's about surviving a hail of arrows and the clash of steel. The armor's design is a testament to the samurai's dual need for protection and agility, a delicate balance akin to walking a tightrope with a sumo wrestler on your shoulders. Now, let's address the romantic notion of the samurai as paragons of honor, engaging in one-on-one duels under cherry blossoms. Spoiler alert, real samurai battles were less about noble duels and more about strategic chaos. The samurai code of honor, or bushido, might have emphasized bravery and fairness, but the reality of war was a messy affair. Battles often involved ambushes, deception, and tactics that would make Machiavelli proud. Take, for example, the Battle of Nagashino in 1575, one of the Sengoku period's most famous conflicts. Here, the samurai didn't line up for a polite exchange of blows. Instead, Oda Nobunaga's forces used innovative tactics, including the strategic placement of arquebusiers, early firearms, that decimated the take-to cavalry. It was less about honor and more about outsmarting your opponent, a reminder that brains often outweighed brawn. And then there's the matter of logistics, because maintaining your gear and your trusty steed is no small feat. Horses are the Ferraris of the samurai world, more than just a means of transportation. They're meticulously bred and trained for battle, and caring for them is like having a high-maintenance pet that eats its weight in grain. A samurai's horse was as critical to his status as his armor. Owning a horse wasn't just a matter of practicality, it was a symbol of nobility. But the upkeep was no small undertaking. Feeding a warhorse required a steady supply of hay and grain, and grooming was a daily ritual. Forget about the carefree image of a cowboy in the Wild West. Being a samurai horseman was more like being a full-time equine concierge. Maintaining your equipment is equally demanding. Your katana must be kept sharp, your armor polished, and your arrows fletched. It's a routine that eats into your day like termites in a log cabin. And let's not forget the cost. Armory upkeep is a financial sinkhole, a reminder that being a samurai isn't just about swinging swords. It's about the economic burden of staying battle-ready. But all this effort isn't just for show. In a world where allegiances shift with the wind and a new threat is always on the horizon, readiness is survival. You're not just preparing for the next battle, you're preparing to navigate the intricate web of power that defines the Sengoku period. It's a game of chess where each knight, bishop, and pawn has its own agenda, and you're just trying to make it to the next move. So, as you ride into the afternoon, remember that the life of a samurai is a balancing act of honor, strategy, and economics. You're not just a warrior. You're a living testament to a tradition that demands as much from your mind as it does from your muscles. The romantic image of the lone samurai endures, but the reality is a complex tapestry of human ambition and ingenuity, woven with threads of both elegance and brutality. And as the sun begins its descent, casting long shadows across the training grounds, you realize that every step, every swing, every decision is part of a larger narrative, a story that's as much about survival as it is about honor. Welcome to the life of a samurai, where every day is a new chapter in a saga that's as relentless as it is riveting. As the day rolls into its final act, the samurai's role shifts from the battlefield to the bustling corridors of power. Because let's face it, even warriors need a day job. Welcome to the not-so-glamorous world of samurai administration and law enforcement, where your katana is as likely to gather dust as it is to draw blood. In 16th century Japan, the samurai were more than just sword-swinging action heroes. They were the bureaucratic backbone holding the whole feudal system together. Your daimyo has a lot on his plate, and guess what? Delegation is the name of the game. As a samurai, you're expected to manage estates, collect taxes, and occasionally play judge, jury, and executioner. This might sound like a career shift that belongs in a modern LinkedIn profile. Samurai seeking mid-level management role in a dynamic feudal environment. But in reality, these duties were crucial to maintaining order in a society where chaos was always lurking around the corner, like a ninja at a surprise party. Let's talk numbers, because what's a samurai without a little math? Managing a fief means overseeing the agricultural output, which is measured in koku, the aforementioned unit of rice that could feed one person for a year. If you're in charge of an estate producing 1,000 koku, you're not just a warrior, you're a rice economist with a sword. Your job is to ensure that every grain is accounted for, taxes are collected, and the peasants aren't plotting a revolt because, let's be honest, nobody likes a tax collector, even one armed to the teeth. But don't get too comfortable behind that desk. Law enforcement is another hat you'll wear, albeit a slightly blood-spattered one. In a world where the legal system is as reliable as a paper umbrella in a typhoon, samurai often serve as enforcers of justice. This isn't about chasing down jaywalkers. It's about maintaining order in a society that's one rice shortage away from chaos. Samurai justice is swift and often brutal, a far cry from the courtroom dramas of today. Think Judge Dredd with a top knot. Yet this administrative role underscores a shifting social order. The Sengoku period is a time of upheaval where samurai are adapting to roles that go beyond the battlefield. The sword might still be revered, but the pen, well, the brush, has found its place in their arsenal. This dual role reflects the broader trend of samurai transitioning from warriors to bureaucrats, a process that will eventually lead to the Edo period's peace and prosperity. And let's not forget the samurai's contribution to culture. Calligraphy, tea ceremonies, and the fine art of not losing your head at the slightest provocation. These are as much a part of samurai life as any battle. Tea ceremonies, in particular, are a lesson in patience and precision, qualities that a samurai needs in spades. Each deliberate movement, from whisking the tea to wiping the bowl, is a meditative exercise that mirrors the discipline required in combat. It's the Zen equivalent of a yoga class, with less spandex and more powdered green tea. As the sun sets, casting a golden hue over the landscape, it's time to reflect on the samurai's legacy. The romantic image of the lone warrior, bound by honor and destined for glory, is a compelling narrative, but it's only part of the story. In reality, samurai were complex figures navigating a labyrinth of duty, economy, and politics. They were as much a product of their time as any hero of legend, with all the contradictions and complexities that entails. So, how would these warriors fare in today's world, where the sharpest weapon is often a keyboard rather than a katana? Well, they'd probably feel right at home in the corporate jungle, where strategy and diplomacy are still the name of the game. Imagine a samurai in a boardroom, negotiating mergers with the same precision as a sword fight, or perhaps moderating a heated online debate with the calm of a tea master. Their skills in discipline, focus, and negotiation would make them formidable opponents in any arena. Yet, the samurai's legacy is a reminder that even the most romanticized figures are grounded in reality. They were warriors, yes, but also administrators, law enforcers, and cultural patrons. Their lives were a testament to the delicate balance between idealism and pragmatism, between the sword and the scroll. They inhabited a world where every decision was a step on a tightrope stretched across the chasms of duty and survival. As you close the book on this day in the life of a samurai, remember that their story is a mirror reflecting both the beauty and brutality of human nature. It's a tale of resilience and adaptability, of finding order in chaos and meaning in the mundane. In a world that often feels as unpredictable as Sengoku Japan, perhaps the samurai teach us that true strength lies not just in wielding a weapon, but in mastering the art of balance. And so ends our journey through the life of a samurai, a narrative as intricate and enduring as the armor they wore. The romantic allure of the samurai will undoubtedly continue to captivate our imaginations, but let's not forget the flesh and blood realities that define them. After all, history is not just about the legends we create, but the truths we uncover. In the bustling colonial world of Weymouth, Massachusetts, where the British Empire's influence loomed like a tall, powdered wig, Abigail Adams was born on November 22, 1744. Picture a world without tick-tock or even electricity, gasp, where the height of entertainment might just be a good book or a lively debate about the latest tea tax. Abigail, or Nabby, as her family affectionately called her, grew up in the midst of this swirling colonial cocktail. Her father, the Reverend William Smith, was a minister with a penchant for sermons, and her mother, Elizabeth, was a social powerhouse in their community. But this wasn't your typical 18th century coming-of-age story filled with corsets and curtsies. From the get-go, Abigail was a bit of a rebel with a cause, education. Now, in a time when women were expected to be more seen than heard, Abigail was having none of that. The 1740 weren't exactly an era of open doors for women's education. The idea of a woman reading anything beyond a recipe book was enough to make some folks clutch their pearls. But Abigail's family, thankfully, wasn't just any family. Her mother taught her to read and write, while her grandmother filled her young mind with tales of history and politics. You might say Abigail was homeschooled before it was cool, or even considered normal. The young Abigail devoured books like they were the latest Netflix series. She read everything from Shakespeare to the Bible, and she didn't just read them, she dissected them. This was a time when women were often taught to sew samplers, not question authority. But Abigail, with her razor-sharp wit and insatiable curiosity, was already setting the stage for a lifetime of challenging the status quo. She wasn't just a bookworm, she was a book dragon, hoarding knowledge and breathing fire when necessary. And then there was John Adams. Ah, John, Abigail first met him when she was a mere 15 years old, and he was a 24-year-old lawyer with ambitions as big as his vocabulary. Their courtship began with letters. Yes, good old-fashioned snail mail. Forget texting. These two exchanged over 100 letters during their lifetimes, a testament to their intellectual and emotional connection. In these letters, Abigail wasn't just John's dear friend or his future wife. She was his equal, his confidante, and often his political sparring partner. Now, let's not romanticize this too much. Their correspondence wasn't just lovey-dovey declarations of affection. Abigail Adams had a tongue as sharp as a quill pen. When John was off politicking, she was managing the household and keeping the farm running, a feat that required the logistical skills of a modern-day CEO. In one of her more famous letters, she penned the now iconic line, "Remember the ladies, and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors." This wasn't just pillow talk. It was a call to arms, a demand for women's rights long before suffrage was even a gleam in Susan B. Anthony's eye. Abigail's early education and her correspondence with John were foundational, not just for her personal life, but for history. This was a woman who didn't just sit in the shadows. She cast a long silhouette over the American Revolution. She was living proof that even in a world that wasn't quite ready for them, educated women could wield influence, albeit from behind the scenes. While John was off debating independence, Abigail's letters became a lifeline, a tether to reality in the whirlwind of revolutionary fervor. She didn't just support the cause, she helped shape it. Sure, the history books might focus more on John's accomplishments, but Abigail was the secret source, the clever strategist behind many of his successes. In a time when the word feminism hadn't even been coined, Abigail was quietly, persistently, and effectively advocating for the rights of women. So there you have it. Abigail Adams, a woman who, from her humble beginnings in Weymouth, Massachusetts, became a formidable figure in early American history. She challenged conventions and blazed trails, all while balancing the demands of family and country. Her life was a testament to the power of education and the enduring impact of a few well-chosen words. And remember, folks, she did all this in a time when tweeting was something only birds did. So there she was, Abigail Adams, a behind-the-scenes virtuoso of the American Revolution, wielding her pen with all the subtlety of a musket shot. But let's hit the rewind button and dive into the whirlwind romance and partnership that was Abigail and John Adams. Their story is like a colonial rom-com, complete with quills, parchment, and the kind of long-distance relationship that would make even a 21st-century couple weary. Abigail met John when she was just 15, and he, a dashing young lawyer of 24, was already climbing the social ladder faster than you can say taxation without representation. Their courtship was less about moonlit walks and more about intellectual sparring matches. Think of it as the 18th century version of a Twitter debate, but with a lot more class and significantly fewer trolls. Their first few letters might have seemed like typical exchanges at first. You know, the usual "dear sir" and "kind regards" formalities. But soon, this correspondence evolved into a rich tapestry of ideas and opinions, laced with wit and more than a hint of flirtation. Abigail wasn't just batting her eyelashes. She was batting around ideas about governance, freedom, and the role of women in society. If you've ever doubted the power of words, consider this. Their letters spanned over 100 pieces of correspondence, creating a paper trail that historians would later feast on like a Thanksgiving turkey. Now, let's bust a few myths about their relationship. For starters, Abigail wasn't just the supportive wife in the background, waiting for John to finish saving the world. She was more like his intellectual equal, challenging him, questioning his decisions, and occasionally giving him the motivational kick in the breaches that he needed. One letter from 1776 stands out, where she famously urged John to remember the ladies, advocating for women's rights with the kind of foresight that would make even the most progressive founding fathers blush. Their letters weren't all political discourse, though. They were peppered with humor and affection, a testament to their deep personal connection. For instance, Abigail often teased John about his verbosity. He had a penchant for long-winded explanations that could rival a modern-day TED talk. She once wrote, "You cannot be, I know, nor do I wish to see you," an inactive spectator, proving she had no patience for idle chatter when there was a revolution to be won. In 1764, After a courtship that could have doubled as a masterclass in Enlightenment philosophy, Abigail and John tied the knot. Now, marriage in the 18th century wasn't all candlelit dinners and romantic getaways. It was a partnership where both parties played significant roles. Abigail was thrust into the life of a farmer's wife, managing the household, raising children, and ensuring the farm ran smoothly, all while John was off politicking. Picture Abigail as the CEO of Adams Inc., where the products were liberty, equality, and a thriving family business, minus the stock options. Let's talk logistics, because if you thought modern relationships were complicated, try maintaining one when your spouse is hundreds of miles away with no face time in sight. John spent a significant chunk of their early marriage in Philadelphia, attending the Continental Congress, while Abigail held down the fort in Massachusetts. It was a time when mail delivery was about as reliable as predicting the weather. Letters could take weeks to arrive, sometimes getting lost in the chaos of war. Yet their correspondence flourished, with Abigail updating John on the state of their home, the latest political gossip, and of course her own astute observations on the revolutionary fervor sweeping the colonies. While John was busy helping draft the Declaration of Independence, Abigail was writing her own declarations on the home front. She dealt with everything from managing the finances to educating their children. The economic realities of their time were harsh. The war effort drained resources, leading to skyrocketing prices and scarcity of goods. Bread, for example, cost about 12 pence a loaf in 1777, compared to just 6 pence a few years earlier. Abigail, ever the resourceful manager, had to stretch every shilling, all while keeping the farm productive and the family fed. Their letters during this period reveal the strain and loneliness of their separation, but also a deep, abiding love and respect. John once wrote, "I must not write a word to you about politics, because you are a woman," only to follow it with pages of political analysis, proving once again that Abigail was his confidante and equal in all things. Her responses were filled with encouragement, critique, and sometimes a touch of sarcasm, keeping John grounded in the midst of political chaos. As John's political career took off, Abigail's role became even more crucial. She was the sounding board for his ideas, the editor of his speeches, and occasionally the critic of his choices. She wasn't afraid to call him out when she disagreed, a dynamic that kept their relationship vibrant and intellectually stimulating. It's no wonder that John once referred to her as Miss Adorable, a nickname that captured both his affection and respect for her formidable intellect. Despite the romantic appeal of their story, let's not sugarcoat the challenges they faced. The Revolutionary War brought with it uncertainty, danger, and sacrifice. There were times when Abigail feared for John's safety and the future of their family. The economic burdens were real, and the emotional toll of their frequent separations weighed heavily on them both. Yet, through it all, their letters remained a lifeline, a testament to their enduring partnership and shared vision for a new nation. As we pause here in our exploration of Abigail and John's journey, remember that their story is far from over. The revolution was just heating up, and the Adamses were about to find themselves at the center of one of the most pivotal periods in American history. So stay tuned, because there's still plenty more to uncover about this dynamic duo and their indelible impact on the world stage. As the smoke of revolution started curling around the colonies, Abigail Adams was busy turning her letters into policy proposals and her kitchen into a command center. Forget the nostalgic image of a colonial housewife baking pies in a sunlit kitchen. Abigail was more like a one-woman think tank armed with quills and a penchant for breaking the mold. Now, let's talk about the zeitgeist of the American Revolution, a time when equal rights was mostly about livestock and less about liberty. The political landscape was a boys' club, and yet here was Abigail, penning what would become one of the most famous letters in American history. On March 31, 1776, she wrote to John, who was elbow-deep in the Continental Congress, "I desire you would remember the ladies and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors." This wasn't just a plea for niceties. It was a revolutionary demand for change, a sharp poke in the ribs of the founding fathers. This letter wasn't merely a footnote in history. It was a bold declaration in a time when women's rights were about as popular as a British tax collector. Abigail was advocating for a world where women weren't just appendages to their husbands, but active participants in the political process. A world where the revolutionary ideas of liberty and justice for all actually included all. Radical, you bet. But let's not kid ourselves. This wasn't some romanticized battle for equality instantly won with a well-placed letter. John, ever the diplomat, responded with a laugh, calling her request a new code of laws, and joking about the tyranny of the petticoat. His response was typical of the era, dismissive yet affectionate, reflecting both the limits of the time and the genuine respect he had for Abigail's intellect. It's easy to romanticize their exchange as a quirky marital spat, but it really underscores the monumental challenge Abigail faced in a world that saw women as decorative rather than dynamic. Meanwhile, Abigail's role was morphing from a colonial housewife into a political advisor, albeit unofficially. She wasn't out there in the trenches or drafting official documents, but through her correspondence, she was influencing policy discussions and political strategies. She became John's trusted advisor, offering insights on everything from economic policies to military strategies. She often warned him and others about the dangers of unchecked power and the need for a just society, proving that her vision extended beyond her own household to the entire fledgling nation. Now, let's add some context to this revolution she was advising on. The economic realities were as harsh as a New England winter. Inflation was skyrocketing, resources were scarce, and the Continental Army was more of a ragtag group than a well-fed military machine. Soldiers often went without pay, and supplies were sporadic at best. Abigail, managing the household finances, would have to contend with prices that were rising faster than a politician's promises. For example, the price of tea, a staple in any colonial home, had surged to 10 shillings a pound by 1777, compared to just 2 shillings before the war. War wasn't just a series of battles fought with muskets and cannons. It was an economic siege that affected every aspect of daily life. And while John was strategizing with the Congress, it was Abigail who was managing the Adams family survival, stretching every penny and ensuring the farm continued to function. Her letters to John were filled with updates on these challenges, painting a vivid picture of life on the home front. Abigail offered more than just updates, though. She critiqued and advised on political matters with the ease of a seasoned diplomat. She wasn't shy about expressing her views on the direction of the nation, often cautioning John against rash decisions or highlighting potential pitfalls in the revolutionary fervor. She was particularly concerned about the treatment of loyalists, those pesky neighbors who still had a thing for King George. Her empathy extended even to those on the opposing side, showcasing her belief in justice and mercy, and her understanding that true liberty required compassion. Despite the chaos of war, Abigail's household was a microcosm of the revolution itself, an environment where necessity drove innovation and where the lines between traditional roles blurred like ink on damp parchment. She was educating their children, managing the farm, and influencing political policy all at once. Abigail was, quite literally, running the revolution from her kitchen table. Her correspondence with John, peppered with humor and candor, revealed the trials of maintaining a relationship in the midst of war. Yet these letters were more than love notes. They were dispatches from the front lines of a domestic revolution, where Abigail was not just a partner in marriage, but a partner in the birth of a nation. She was, in many ways, a proto-feminist in a time when feminism wasn't a movement, but a whisper in the wind. As the war raged on, Abigail's influence continued to grow, albeit quietly and behind the scenes. Her role as an advisor was unofficial but undeniable, and her insights were valued by John and others who recognized her intellect and political acumen. She was laying the groundwork for future generations of women, proving that even in a world that preferred them silent, women could wield power with the stroke of a pen. Abigail's story is a testament to the power of words and the influence of those who dare to challenge the status quo. It's a reminder that behind every great man, there might just be an even greater woman, whispering truths and shaping destinies from the shadows. The American Revolution may have been a man's game on the surface, but the women like Abigail Adams were the ones keeping score and changing the rules. As we wrap up this chapter in Abigail's life, remember that her journey was far from over. The war was still raging, and the new nation was about to face its biggest test yet. Abigail's role in this unfolding drama was just beginning, and her legacy would continue to influence the course of American history in ways that were both profound and enduring. So stay tuned, because the story of Abigail Adams is far from finished, and there are still many more pages to turn in this remarkable tale. As the ink dried on the Treaty of Paris in 1783, signaling the official end of the Revolutionary War, you might think Abigail and John Adams would be ready to kick back and enjoy a well-earned break. But hold your horses, because life for the Adams family was just getting started. With John appointed as the first U.S. Minister to Great Britain, Abigail found herself thrust into the role of diplomatic spouse. And trust me, this was no afternoon tea party. Fast forward to 1789, and John Adams was elected as the first Vice President of the United States, making Abigail the nation's inaugural Second Lady. Now, if you think this was merely a title with no real responsibilities, you'd be as wrong as a lobster at a vegan barbecue. Abigail was more than just the woman standing next to the man who stood next to George Washington. She was a political consigliere, a sounding board, and occasionally an unofficial PR consultant. Let's set the scene. The new capital was New York City, a bustling metropolis where the nation's first government was trying to find its footing. The city was an urban jungle with cobblestone streets and the constant din of horse-drawn carriages. Here, Abigail navigated the social whirl with aplomb, hosting dinners and salons that were less about small talk and more about shaping the fledgling nation's policies. Her gatherings were like the 18th century equivalent of a power lunch, where the menu included political strategy alongside roast mutton. And speaking of power, Abigail's role as second lady was akin to being the vice principal of a school where every student was a founding father. She was the social glue, smoothing over political rifts with her wit and charm. But let's not romanticize her influence too much. The early republic was more fragile than Fabergé, and Abigail's task was to help John navigate a political landscape as rocky as the Appalachian Mountains. Abigail's tenure as second lady involved far more than just social engagements. She was John's behind-the-scenes advisor, helping him maneuver through the treacherous waters of early American politics. When Washington was unanimously elected president, John, as vice president, found himself in the peculiar position of being the Senate's presiding officer, but with no real power. Imagine being the DJ at a party where you're not allowed to pick the playlist. Abigail, with her characteristic insight, helped John reconcile with his largely ceremonial role, reminding him of the bigger picture, a nation in its infancy that needed stability more than ego-driven infighting. Now, let's talk economics, because the fledgling United States was about as financially solvent as a college student with a maxed-out credit card. The national debt was a staggering $54 million, a king's ransom back then, and taxes were about as popular as a rainstorm at a picnic. Abigail, ever the practical economist, understood the importance of fiscal responsibility. She often discussed these issues with John, providing a voice of reason in a time when fiscal policy was more theory than practice. In 1797, John Adams ascended to the presidency, and Abigail became First Lady. But hold on to your bonnet. Being the First Lady wasn't just about picking out china patterns. It was about managing the president's household in a city that was still under construction. The capital had moved to Philadelphia, where the temporary presidential mansion was less a stately home and more a fixer-upper. Abigail took on this challenge with a characteristic blend of grit and grace. She transformed the presidential residence into a hub of political discussion, where ideas flowed as freely as the Madeira wine. And let's not forget her role as the president's confidante. Abigail's letters to John during his presidency were filled with astute observations and candid advice, often laced with the kind of humor that could lighten the darkest of political storms. She had a knack for cutting through the noise, offering insights that were as sharp as a well-honed quill. Now, as First Lady, Abigail faced her share of political adversaries, a role that required the finesse of a diplomat and the toughness of a revolutionary. The political scene was fractious, with emerging factions that would later solidify into the country's first political parties. Federalists and Democratic Republicans were at each other's throats, and the press was as partisan as a family Thanksgiving dinner after too much wine. Abigail, unflinching in her support for John, didn't shy away from conflict. She was known to respond to critics with a sharp tongue and an even sharper pen. Her letters reveal a woman who was deeply involved in the political fray, offering counsel and critique with equal measure. She understood the power of public opinion and often advised John on how to navigate the treacherous waters of early American politics. But let's not sugarcoat this period. The Alien and Sedition Acts, passed in 1798, were a blot on the Adams administration, curbing free speech in the name of national security. Abigail supported these measures, believing they were necessary to maintain order in a nation still finding its feet. It's easy to criticize from the comfort of hindsight, but in a world where the specter of war with France loomed large, these decisions were made under immense pressure and uncertainty. And while Abigail was wielding influence in the political arena, she was also managing a household in a city that was still more wilderness than metropolis. Philadelphia was a city of contrasts, where elegant soirees were held alongside streets that were often muddy and chaotic. Abigail's ability to juggle these demands was a testament to her resilience and resourcefulness. Despite the challenges, Abigail's time as First Lady was marked by her unwavering commitment to her husband's presidency and her dedication to the principles of the new nation. She understood that the early years of the Republic were precarious, and her role was to support John in building a foundation that would endure. Her influence was felt not just in the policies of the day, but in the very fabric of American political life, where her legacy as a pioneering First Lady continues to resonate. As we leave Abigail at the heart of the nation's political stage, remember that her story is far from over. The challenges of building a new nation were immense, and Abigail's role in this unfolding drama was as complex as it was crucial. So stay tuned, because there's still more to uncover about this remarkable woman who shaped the early years of the United States from both the kitchen table and the corridors of power. While Abigail performed the high-wire act of First Lady, juggling political intrigue and domestic duties, the world around her was a whirlwind of change. The early years of the United States were like a toddler learning to walk, full of stumbles, chaos, and the occasional tantrum. But Abigail was more than just a supporting character in this drama. She was a driving force, even if history often prefers to highlight the exploits of her husband, John. Now, let's fast forward to the twilight of Abigail's life, a time when the spotlight dimmed, but her influence continued to resonate. After John's presidency ended in 1801, the Adams family retreated to their farm in Quincy, Massachusetts. You might think this period was all about knitting by the fire and reminiscing about the good old days. But Abigail, ever the dynamo, wasn't content to fade into obscurity. Instead, she focused her energies on family and correspondence, proving that even in retirement, she was as sharp as a tack. Her letters during these years are a treasure trove for historians and armchair detectives alike, providing an unfiltered glimpse into the mind of a woman who had seen it all. Over her lifetime, she penned thousands of letters, not just to John, but to friends, family, and even political figures. These letters are like time capsules, capturing the essence of an era and the thoughts of a woman who was always ahead of her time. Abigail's correspondence reveals her as a keen observer of the human condition, with a wit as dry as a well-aged wine. For example, she often mused about the absurdity of politics, noting the contradictions and follies of those in power. In one letter, she quipped, "Great necessities call out great virtues," a reminder that even in times of crisis, there's room for heroism and the occasional blunder. Let's talk legacy, because Abigail Adams is often hailed as a proto-feminist icon, a trailblazer who championed women's rights before it was fashionable. But here's the catch. While she did advocate for the education and empowerment of women, labeling her a feminist in the modern sense is a bit like calling a horse-drawn carriage a sports car. The world she inhabited was one where women's roles were largely confined to the domestic sphere, and Abigail's brand of activism was subtle, often woven into the fabric of her everyday life. Yet, despite these limitations, Abigail's influence was profound. Her call to remember the ladies was a revolutionary act, a challenge to the status quo that rippled through the corridors of power. She argued for women's education, believing that an informed woman was a force to be reckoned with. Her letters often touched on these themes, advocating for a future where women could contribute to society on equal footing with men. It's a vision that resonates even today, reminding us of the enduring power of her words. The myth of Abigail as a proto-feminist icon is both tantalizing and complex. It's easy to romanticize her as a lone voice in the wilderness, demanding change in a society that preferred women to be seen, not heard. But the reality is more nuanced. Abigail was a product of her time, navigating a world that was often hostile to women's ambitions. She pushed boundaries, yes, but she also understood the constraints she faced, using her influence in ways that were both subtle and strategic. In her later years, Abigail's focus shifted to her family, a constant source of joy and occasionally frustration. She was a devoted mother and grandmother, but she wasn't afraid to dish out tough love when necessary. Her letters to her children are filled with advice, encouragement, and sometimes a stern warning or two. She urged them to be virtuous, industrious, and above all, educated, believing that knowledge was the key to a life well lived. Abigail's legacy is a tapestry woven with threads of wisdom, humor, and resilience. Her life was a testament to the power of words and the indelible impact of those who dare to challenge the status quo. She understood that change was a slow and often painful process, but she never wavered in her belief that it was possible. Her letters stand as a testament to this belief, offering a window into the mind of a woman who was both a product and a pioneer of her time. As we wrap up this tale, it's worth noting that Abigail Adams' influence extends far beyond the letters she left behind. She paved the way for future generations of women in politics, from the suffragettes who demanded the right to vote to modern-day leaders who continue to shatter glass ceilings. Her story is a reminder that even in a world that prefers to forget, the voices of those who dare to speak up can echo through history. In the final years of her life, Abigail remained a formidable presence, even as her health began to decline. She passed away on October 28, 1818, at the age of 73, leaving behind a legacy as rich and varied as the life she led. Her death marked the end of an era, but her spirit lived on in the hearts of those who knew her and in the pages of her letters, which continue to inspire and enlighten us to this day. So, as we close the book on Abigail Adams, let's remember her not just as a first lady or a political advisor, but as a woman who dared to challenge the conventions of her time. She was a trailblazer, a thinker, and above all, a writer whose words continue to resonate with those who seek to understand the past and shape the future. Her story is a testament to the enduring power of words and the legacy of those who wield them with purpose and passion. The story of Catherine the Great's rise from a relatively obscure German princess to the mighty Empress of Russia isn't your typical rags-to-riches tale. Nope, this is more of a mediocre monarch saga with its fair share of political intrigue, awkward marriages, and a hefty serving of geopolitical chess. Meet Sophie Friederike August von Anhalt-Zerbst-Dornberg, or just Sophie if you're not a fan of tongue twisters. Born in 1729 in Stettin, Prussia, now Szczecin, Poland, Sophie was the daughter of a minor prince with a title that was about as valuable as a coupon for 10% off at the local market. Her early life was as thrilling as a rainy Tuesday, until the political winds started blowing in a very Russian direction. By the time she hit 15, Sophie found herself on a one-way trip to the frozen north, thanks to a political matchmaking scheme that would make even the most seasoned Tinder user blush. In 1744, she was shipped off to Russia to marry Grand Duke Peter, the heir to the Russian throne. Now, Peter wasn't exactly Prince Charming. Described as infantile and obsessed with playing soldier, he was basically the 18th century version of that guy who never shuts up about his video game collection. Sophie's transformation from a German duchess to Russian royalty required more than just a change of address. It demanded a complete identity overhaul. First on the list was a rebranding worthy of a reality TV makeover. Sophie took on the name Catherine, because apparently Catherine the Great rolls off the tongue a bit better than Sophie the slightly confused. Speaking of confused, let's talk about her marriage to Peter. If you're picturing a Disney fairy tale, you might want to set down those rose-colored glasses. Their marriage was about as harmonious as a cat and a vacuum cleaner. Peter's idea of a good time was marching around in his toy soldier uniform, while Catherine, ever the pragmatist, was busy plotting her own course, both romantically and politically. The Russian court was a hotbed of intrigue, with backstabbing as common as tea breaks. Catherine quickly learned to navigate these treacherous waters. She was a student of Voltaire and the Enlightenment, and she had ambition that could rival the size of the Siberian tundra. She studied Russian, converted to orthodoxy, and set her sights on more than just surviving in this cutthroat world. She aimed to thrive. Meanwhile, the economic and political landscape of Russia was a bit of a fixer-upper. The country was vast, spanning over 6 million square miles, but its infrastructure was about as developed as a 13-year-old's facial hair. Serfdom was the name of the game, with millions bound to the land and the whims of their landlords. The Russian economy was largely agrarian and creaky, like an old wooden cart that needed a serious upgrade, but just kept getting another coat of paint instead. Catherine saw potential where others saw problems. She envisioned a modern Russia, one that could hold its own with the superpowers of Europe. However, before she could put her grand plans into motion, she had to deal with the small matter of her husband. Peter was less interested in ruling Russia than he was in playing dress-up with his toy soldiers, and his foreign policies seemed more like the antics of a bumbling schoolboy than those of a future Tsar. In the political arena, Catherine proved herself to be a master strategist. She knew how to play the game, leveraging alliances and outmaneuvering her opponents with the finesse of a grandmaster. Her intelligence was her weapon, and she wielded it with precision and purpose. She was a woman in a man's world, and she was not about to let anyone forget that. As Catherine plotted her path to the throne, Russia was a country on the brink of change. The Enlightenment was sweeping across Europe, bringing with it ideas of liberty, progress, and reason. Catherine was determined to bring these ideas to Russia, to drag it kicking and screaming into the modern age. But first, she needed to secure her position and ensure that she, not Peter, would be the one to lead Russia into the future. So there she was, a young woman far from home, surrounded by political sharks, and married to a man who was more interested in his toy soldiers than real ones. Yet, through her cunning, intelligence, and sheer force of will, she would rise to become one of the most powerful women in history. But that's a story for another day. For now, it's enough to say that Catherine the Great's early years were anything but a fairy tale. They were the beginning of a legend. Catherine the Great's early years laid the groundwork for a tale that was far from over, and her next chapter was all about seizing the throne from her less-than-competent husband, Peter Roman III. If the Russian court was a stage, then Catherine was the lead actor, set to steal the scene in a drama that would make Game of Thrones look like a school play. The year was 1762, a time when wigs were tall and palace intrigue was taller. Peter Roman III had just ascended to the throne, but his reign was on shakier ground than a Jenga tower in an earthquake zone. Peter was about as popular as a rainstorm at a picnic, and his policies seemed tailor-made to alienate just about everyone. For starters, his admiration for Frederick the Great of Prussia, Russia's sworn enemy, was like waving a red flag in front of a bull. He even pulled Russia out of a victorious war against Prussia, which was about as savvy as quitting the race just before the finish line. Enter Grigory Orlov, a dashing officer in the Russian army with the kind of charisma that could probably sell ice to Siberians. He wasn't just a pretty face, though. He was also Catherine's lover and a key ally in her plan to topple Peter. The coup was an exercise in realpolitik, the kind of behind-the-scenes maneuvering that makes you realize why House of Cards resonates so well with history buffs. In June 1762, the wheels of revolution were set in motion, albeit with all the grace of a clumsy ballet. Catherine knew she needed the support of the military, so she and Orlov orchestrated a coup that was equal parts audacious and awkward. Picture this. Catherine, a future empress, was woken up in the middle of the night, not by a royal alarm clock, but by a guard pounding on her door. Apparently the coup couldn't wait for breakfast. Catherine, ever the quick thinker, donned a military uniform and made her way to the army barracks in St. Petersburg. There, she rallied the troops with a speech that would make any motivational speaker proud. It was a scene straight out of a historical epic. Catherine, standing before the soldiers, exuding confidence and authority, turning their allegiance with a few well-chosen words. The soldiers, likely tired of Peter's antics and inspired by Catherine's vision, pledged their loyalty to her. Meanwhile, Peter was blissfully unaware of the political storm brewing. He was at his palace in Oranienbaum, focusing on things that mattered to him, like toy soldiers and maybe a nice cup of tea. But once he got wind of the coup, he fled to Kronstadt, hoping the naval base would offer him refuge. Unfortunately for Peter, the sailors there were about as eager to support him as cats are to take a bath. They turned him away, leaving him high and dry, with only his poor decision-making skills for company. By July 9, Catherine had swept into St. Petersburg with the kind of fanfare usually reserved for rock stars. She was declared Catherine Roman II, Empress of Russia, in a relatively bloodless coup, a feat that was as impressive as it was rare in the annals of history. It was as if the universe had conspired to hand her the throne on a silver platter, albeit one that came with a few scratches and dents. But let's not gloss over the costs of this loyalty. The coup was a masterclass in quid pro quo, with Catherine rewarding her supporters with titles, land, and wealth. The Orlov brothers, Grigory and his siblings, were given top positions in the Russian court, a reminder that in politics, loyalty is often paid for in cold, hard rubles. With Peter safely removed, permanently, as it turned out, thanks to a suspiciously timed accident, Catherine could finally focus on her real passion, reforming Russia. Her first move was to stabilize the realm, which was about as cohesive as wet tissue paper. She signed a manifesto pardoning all political prisoners, a shrewd move to win over the populace and erase the chaos of Peter's reign from collective memory. Catherine also knew that image was everything. So, she initiated immediate reforms to modernize Russia and solidify her power. She reformed the Senate, turning it into an effective governing body rather than a glorified debating club. She also sought to improve the country's legal system, which at the time was about as fair as a rigged carnival game. Her aim was to bring the Enlightenment to Russia, a land that seemed more medieval than modern. In the economic arena, Catherine had her work cut out for her. The Russian economy was like a rusty old engine, sputtering along and in desperate need of an overhaul. She commissioned the construction of roads and canals to improve trade, realizing that a landlocked economy was about as useful as a chocolate teapot. She also encouraged foreign investment, inviting European entrepreneurs to set up shop in Russia, which was her way of saying, let's make this place the next big thing. Her efforts to reform serfdom, though, were more of a pipe dream than a reality. The institution was deeply entrenched, and any attempt to dismantle it would have been met with resistance sharper than a Cossack's saber. Yet, Catherine's vision was clear. She was determined to drag Russia into the modern world, even if it meant taking a few detours along the way. With the coup behind her, Catherine had secured her place in history, not just as a ruler, but as a reformer and a visionary. Her reign was only just beginning, and the story of how she transformed Russia into a major European power was yet to unfold. But for now, she had proven that a woman from a minor German duchy could rise to become one of the most formidable leaders in history, a testament to her intellect, ambition, and sheer force of will. And so, with a crown securely on her head and a nation at her feet, Catherine the Great set her sights on the future, ready to write her own chapter in the annals of history. And so, with a crown securely on her head and a nation at her feet, Catherine the Great set her sights on the future, ready to write her own chapter in the annals of history. But as anyone who's tried to wrangle a stubborn mule will tell you, steering a nation towards modernity is no small feat. Catherine wasn't just up against an outdated system. She was confronting centuries of entrenched tradition, which was about as flexible as a block of granite. Let's start with education, because if knowledge is power, Catherine was looking to supercharge Russia's engines. One of her crowning achievements was the establishment of the Smolny Institute in 1764, the first state educational institution for women in Russia. This was a big deal, folks. Before Smolny, the closest most Russian women got to a formal education was learning how to curtsy without toppling over. The institute aimed to churn out the next generation of educated women, ready to take on the Enlightenment ideals Catherine so admired. It was like Hogwarts, but instead of magic, the girls were learning manners, literature, and a bit of math on the side. But let's not get carried away with the pomp and circumstance. The Smolny Institute was progressive for its time, sure, but it was no bastion of radical feminist thought. The curriculum was heavy on the arts and etiquette, light on the sciences. The message was clear. You could be educated, but not too educated. A delicate balance, like walking a tightrope in heels. Then there's the Knackers, Catherine's ambitious attempt to overhaul Russia's legal system. Drafted in 1767, the Knackers was a legislative manifesto inspired by the Enlightenment and aimed at reforming the judicial system. It was packed with radical ideas, like equality before the law and the prohibition of torture, concepts that were about as popular with the Russian nobility as a surprise audit. The Knackers was Catherine's love letter to Enlightenment thinkers like Montesquieu and Beccaria, and it was groundbreaking. If only it hadn't been so theoretical. You see, the Knackers was a beautiful dream, but dreams have a pesky habit of crashing into reality. The document was more of a philosophical treatise than a practical legal code. It was read aloud to a legislative commission, a gathering of representatives intended to discuss and implement reforms. But the commission was disbanded shortly after without achieving much. It was like writing an award-winning screenplay and then shelving it to collect dust. And then there was serfdom, the elephant in the room that Catherine couldn't quite ignore. At its peak, about 23 million serfs were bound to the land, living lives that made medieval peasants look like rock stars. Catherine's attempts to reform serfdom were lukewarm at best. Sure, she occasionally paid lip service to the idea of freeing the serfs, but when push came to shove, she prioritized the support of the nobility, who owned these serfs, over any radical social changes. In the end, her policies often resulted in tightening the screws on serfs rather than loosening them. It was progress, but only if you squinted really hard and tilted your head. Catherine's reign was filled with contradictions. She was an enlightened despot, a term that sounds like an oxymoron because it is. Her court was a hub of intellectual activity, filled with philosophers, scientists, and artists. Yet her rule was marked by authoritarian control, a necessary evil to maintain stability in a sprawling empire that stretched across 11 time zones. It's hard to be everyone's favorite empress when you're also trying to keep the peace in a nation that's as easy to manage as herding cats. Economically, Catherine was all about modernization, but she had to deal with the Russian economy, which was about as dynamic as a tortoise on a leisurely stroll. Her solution: open up Russia to the world. She invited foreigners to settle and invest, offering incentives like land grants and tax exemptions. It was like a 1760s version of Shark Tank. But instead of pitching ideas for apps or gadgets, they were pitching farms and factories. Catherine's love affair with the Enlightenment was genuine, but it was also a bit like reading a self-help book and then shelving it without taking action. She corresponded with the likes of Voltaire and Diderot, but implementing their ideas in Russia was another matter entirely. The Enlightenment was a European affair, and Catherine was attempting to graft its ideals onto a Russian society that was still, in many ways, medieval. Let's not forget the myth that Catherine was the ultimate reformer. It's tempting to paint her as a one-woman revolution, but the truth is, her reforms were often compromised by political necessity. She was working within a system that was resistant to change and surrounded by a nobility that valued its privileges above all else. Catherine had to pick her battles, and sometimes that meant leaving the grand ideals on the drawing board. The reality was that for every step Catherine took towards modernity, she had to take 2 steps back to keep the peace. Her reign was a balancing act, and she was walking a tightrope without a safety net. But perhaps that's what makes her story so compelling. Catherine wasn't a perfect ruler by any means, but she was a pragmatic one. She knew that to change Russia, she had to play the long game, even if it meant sacrificing some of her loftiest goals on the altar of political survival. In the end, Catherine's domestic policies were a mixed bag of triumphs and failures, dreams and realities. She was an empress caught between the ideals of the Enlightenment and the harsh realities of ruling a vast, unwieldy empire. Her legacy is as complex as the woman herself, a testament to her intellect, ambition, and the stark realities of 18th century politics. As for the myths of her enlightened rule, they continue to captivate us, reminding us that history, much like life, is often more complicated than it seems. And as Catherine looked ahead, she knew that her greatest challenges and greatest triumphs were still to come. Catherine's domestic policies were just the opening act. Now it was time for her to take the show on the road. And by road, I mean the vast, unpredictable theater of European geopolitics. With her empire stretching from the Baltic to the Black Sea, Catherine had a chessboard that would make even the most seasoned players sweat. But she wasn't just playing for checkmate, she was playing for keeps. Let's dive straight into the Russo-Turkish Wars, where Catherine's ambitions clashed with the Ottoman Empire in a bid to expand Russia's influence and territory. The first of these wars kicked off in 1768, lasting until 1774, a 6-year slugfest that was less about swift victories and more about grinding attrition. The stakes: control of the Black Sea, a strategic jewel for any empire looking to flex its maritime muscles. The Ottoman Empire, often referred to as the sick man of Europe, wasn't exactly in peak condition. But don't let that nickname fool you. They were still a formidable foe, and their navy was no pushover. Catherine, on the other hand, had a burgeoning fleet, thanks to some serious maritime investments. The Russian navy, under the command of Alexei Orlov, yes, another Orlov, delivered a knockout punch at the Battle of Chesma in 1770. Picture this: Russian ships turning Ottoman vessels into flaming wrecks, a fiery spectacle that lit up the Aegean Sea like an impromptu fireworks display. It was a decisive victory that gave Russia a foothold in the Mediterranean, a region they'd been eyeing like a kid in a candy store. But let's not sugarcoat it. This war was costly. We're talking about 100,000 Russian casualties, and the treasury taking a hit that would make any accountant reach for the antacids. Yet, in the end, it was worth it. The Treaty of Kusuk-Kainaka in 1774 was a diplomatic triumph for Catherine. Russia gained territory in the Black Sea region, including the Crimean Khanate's independence from the Ottomans, a move that was about as permanent as a sandcastle at high tide. Crimea was the real prize, a gateway to the southern seas, and Catherine was playing the long game. Speaking of Crimea, let's talk about its annexation in 1783. This wasn't just a land grab, it was a geopolitical checkmate. Catherine's advisors, including the legendary Prince Grigory Potemkin, orchestrated the annexation with all the subtlety of a bull in a china shop. Potemkin villages, those mythical, picturesque facades supposedly built to impress Catherine on her tours, may be more legend than fact, but they symbolized the blend of reality and perception that defined her rule. Crimea wasn't just a piece of land. It was a statement of Russian power, a bold declaration that echoed across Europe. Now, while Catherine was busy redrawing the map, she was also penning letters to some of the greatest minds of the Enlightenment. Her correspondence with Voltaire is legendary. Imagine two intellectual giants swapping ideas about philosophy, governance, and naturally, a bit of gossip. Voltaire famously dubbed her the Star of the North, a title that must have made Catherine blush with pride, or perhaps smirk with satisfaction. But while the letters were filled with Enlightenment ideals, the gritty reality of military campaigns was less glamorous. The logistics of war were daunting. Supplies had to traverse vast distances over land that was less bucolic countryside and more endless muddy quagmire. Soldiers faced not just the enemy but disease, starvation, and the kind of conditions that would make a Spartan think twice. It was a harsh reminder that while Catherine's pen might have been mightier than the sword was still very much in play. Now, why was Catherine so keen on expansion? Economics, my friends. Russia's economy was still largely agrarian, and access to warm-water ports was the key to unlocking its potential. The Black Sea was a lifeline for trade, a conduit for the exchange of goods that could revitalize the Russian economy. This wasn't just about prestige, it was about survival. A nation that spanned 2 continents couldn't afford to be hemmed in by ice and geography. Catherine's military engagements weren't limited to the Ottomans. She also had her sights set on Poland, that poor, beleaguered chess piece caught between the great powers of Europe. The partitions of Poland in the late 18th century were a geopolitical carve-up that would make a Thanksgiving turkey blush. Russia, Prussia, and Austria each took a slice, reducing Poland from a proud kingdom to a mere footnote in history books. For Catherine, it was another strategic coup, a buffer zone against Western Europe, and a consolidation of power that made Russia a force to be reckoned with. Yet, even as Catherine expanded her empire, she had to contend with the limitations of her power. The Russian army, while formidable, was stretched thin, and maintaining control over new territories required a delicate balance of diplomacy and force. Revolts were a constant threat, a reminder that the conquered weren't always content to stay that way. Catherine's foreign policy was a mix of pragmatism and ambition, a reflection of her own complex character. She was an autocrat with the heart of a philosopher, a ruler who dreamed of a modern Russia but understood the necessity of military might. Her vision was grand, her methods sometimes ruthless, but her legacy was undeniable. As we leave Catherine poised on the brink of further greatness, remember that her story isn't just about battles won and territories annexed. It's a tale of a woman who wielded power in a man's world, who corresponded with philosophers while commanding generals, and who played the game of thrones with the kind of skill that would make any modern strategist green with envy. So, as Catherine looked out over her expanding empire, she must have felt a sense of accomplishment, tempered by the knowledge that her work was far from done. The challenges ahead were as vast as the lands she ruled, and her story, like history itself, was still unfolding, with new chapters waiting to be written. As Catherine gazed over her expanding empire, she must have felt the weight of her accomplishments, tempered by the realization that her story was far from over. The challenges ahead were vast, much like the sprawling lands she ruled, and her tale, like that of Russia itself, was still unfolding, with new chapters eagerly awaiting their turn. Now, let's fast forward to Catherine's twilight years, a period rife with speculation, scandal, and substantial contributions to culture and society. Her later years were marked by a flurry of activity that will put most people's bucket lists to shame. Take, for instance, her dedication to the arts. Catherine was a patron of the Hermitage Museum, which she founded in 1764. By the time of her death in 1796, the collection boasted over 4,000 paintings, a testament to her keen eye for art and her desire to transform Russia into a cultural powerhouse. The Hermitage was her way of saying, look, Russia is more than just bears and vodka. We can do art too. Catherine's cultural contributions didn't stop with the arts. She was a prolific writer, penning plays, operas, and even a few satirical pieces that poked fun at the court's absurdities. Literary works were more than just vanity projects. They were reflections of her intellect and her desire to engage with the Enlightenment's ideals. She corresponded with the likes of Voltaire and Diderot, but she also wrote for herself, exploring themes of power, morality, and human nature. It's as if she was trying to write her own narrative, one where she could be both empress and philosopher, ruler and thinker. But let's not get carried away with the romance of it all. Catherine's later years were also marked by more pragmatic concerns, namely succession. Her son, Paul, was about as eager to rule as a cat is to take a bath. Their relationship was fraught with tension, a classic case of parental expectations and rebellious offspring. Catherine wasn't convinced that Paul was fit to inherit the throne, and she considered bypassing him in favor of her grandson, Alexander. It was a game of dynastic chess, and Catherine was determined to make the right move, even if it meant appending the traditional line of succession. Yet, for all her planning, fate had other ideas. Catherine died suddenly in November 1796, leaving the throne to Paul after all. Her death was as dramatic as her life, sparking rumors and legends that have persisted through the ages. One particularly persistent myth involves her supposed romantic entanglements. Let's just say that some tales have more in common with supermarket tabloids than historical fact. The most infamous legend involves her alleged dalliance with a horse, a story as ridiculous as it is baseless. It's a testament to the enduring fascination with Catherine's personal life, but it's also a reminder of how history can become distorted in the retelling. Yet, for all the salacious myths, Catherine's real legacy lies in her impact on Russia and Europe. Her reign saw the expansion of the Russian Empire by over 200,000 square miles, solidifying its status as a major player on the world stage. Her domestic policies, while often compromised by political realities, laid the groundwork for modernization. She introduced reforms in education, law, and administration, even if they didn't always achieve the sweeping changes she envisioned. Her engagement with the Enlightenment's ideals, though sometimes more rhetorical than practical, positioned Russia as a cultural and intellectual hub. Economically, Catherine's reign was a time of growth and transformation. She opened up trade routes, encouraged industrial development, and strengthened Russia's fiscal position. Yet the spectre of serfdom remained, a stubborn stain on her otherwise progressive agenda. Her inability to abolish serfdom reflects the complexities of her rule. She was both a visionary and a pragmatist, navigating a landscape fraught with contradictions and challenges. In the broader context of European history, Catherine's reign was a period of shifting alliances and geopolitical maneuvering. Her expansionist policies reshaped the map of Europe, while her cultural initiatives brought Russia into the fold of the Enlightenment. She corresponded with the great thinkers of her time, yet maintained an iron grip on her empire, balancing the ideals of liberty with the realities of autocratic rule. Catherine's legacy is as multifaceted as the woman herself. She was a ruler who defied expectations, a woman who wielded power in a world dominated by men. Her story is one of ambition, intellect, and resilience, a testament to what one can achieve with a keen mind and an unyielding spirit. Yet, her reign also serves as a cautionary tale about the limits of power and the complexities of governance. As we close the book on Catherine the Great, let's remember her not just as a conqueror or a reformer, but as a woman who dared to dream big in a world that often preferred small thinking. Her legacy is a reminder that history is not just about the past, but about the stories we tell and the lessons we learn. And so, as we bid adieu to the Empress of all Russia, let's tip our hats to a woman who, against all odds, left an indelible mark on the world, a mark that continues to captivate, challenge, and inspire us to this day. In the bustling city of Pisa in 1564, where the Leaning Tower was already doing its best impression of a drunken sailor, a baby named Galileo Galilei was born. Now, this wasn't the kind of place you'd expect one of history's greatest minds to pop out of. Pisa was more about maritime trade and less about groundbreaking scientific thought. But hey, every genius has to start somewhere, right? Galileo's early life was about as traditional as a Renaissance man's could get, with one tiny exception. He had an insatiable curiosity. His dad, Vincenzo Galilei, was a musician and music theorist, which probably meant the household was filled with the sweet sounds of lutes and viols. But young Galileo wasn't content with just toe-tapping to the latest lute hits. He was more interested in the math behind the music, which probably made him the least fun kid at parties. When it came time for formal education, Galileo was shipped off to the University of Pisa in 1581. The plan? To become a doctor, of course, because nothing says parental approval in Renaissance Italy quite like a medical degree. But much to his father's probable chagrin, Galileo had other ideas. The young man found himself utterly bored by the humdrum of medical studies, and instead was drawn to the study of mathematics and physics. Oh, the scandal of it all. Imagine your kid dropping out of pre-med to chase numbers and theories instead of diagnosing the plague. Galileo's medical school tenure was short-lived, just like a New Year's resolution. He was entranced by the works of Euclid and Archimedes, which were about as thrilling to him as the latest blockbuster is to us. By 1583, he was spending more time under the tutelage of Ostilio Rixai, a mathematician who introduced him to geometry, than he was dissecting bodies or studying humors. His early career was marked by a peculiar mix of brilliance and the kind of stubbornness that would make a mule look flexible. Galileo had this knack for questioning everything, which, unsurprisingly, didn't win him any popularity contests among the academic elite. In fact, one of his first acts of rebellion was to challenge the Aristotelian view of physics, which was kind of like telling the Pope his hat was too big. He famously conducted an experiment from the Leaning Tower of Pisa, dropping two spheres of different masses to demonstrate that their rate of descent was independent of their mass, a concept that was as radical then as skinny jeans are at a formal event now. This naturally earned him some side-eye from his professors, who were probably not amused by this young upstart challenging the dogma they'd been spoon-fed since they were knee-high to a grasshopper. But Galileo wasn't one to let a little academic disapproval slow him down. He was on a roll, and nothing was going to stop him, not even the fact that he was flat broke. Money, or the lack thereof, was a persistent thorn in Galileo's side. He occasionally had to tutor students just to keep bread on the table and wine in his cup. He was a master of frugality, which is just a fancy way of saying he was perpetually broke. His financial woes were so pronounced that he once considered joining a monastery just to get a free meal, though the idea of donning a robe and taking a vow of silence was probably less appealing than the prospect of figuring out how the heavens moved. Despite his monetary misadventures, Galileo's early career was a whirlwind of teaching gigs and innovative ideas. In 1589, he snagged a position teaching mathematics at the University of Pisa. It wasn't the cushiest job, but it was a start. His lectures captivated students with their clarity and insight, though not everyone was a fan. Some of his colleagues were less than thrilled with his unconventional methods and outspoken nature. Let's face it, Galileo was the kind of guy who'd bring a flamethrower to a marshmallow roast just to see what would happen. By 1592, Galileo was off to the University of Padua, where he would spend the next 18 years, arguably the happiest and most productive of his life. Padua was a hotbed of intellectual activity, a place where he could let his ideas run wild like a toddler in a candy store. Here, Galileo finally had the freedom to explore the cosmos without the stifling confines of Pisa's traditionalism breathing down his neck. As his career unfolded, it was clear that Galileo was a man ahead of his time, armed with a telescope and a healthy dose of skepticism. But before he could challenge the universe, he had to navigate the tricky waters of academia and the even trickier task of keeping the lights on at home. Galileo's story is a potent reminder that genius often comes with a side of grit and a sprinkle of rebellion, served with a healthy dose of humor. Because sometimes the only way to see the stars is to shake things up a bit, even if it means ruffling a few feathers along the way. But Galileo's story wasn't just about shaking up the academic world. It was also about peering into the cosmos with a sense of wonder that could rival a kid in a candy store. Enter the telescope, a Dutch invention that Galileo didn't just adopt. He took it on a personal makeover show. Originally, the telescope was the 16th century equivalent of a toy you'd find in a cereal box. Fun, but not particularly useful. It was invented in 1608 by Hans Lippershey, a spectacle maker from the Netherlands, and was primarily a novelty for making distant objects seem closer. Galileo got wind of this optical marvel and immediately saw its potential, not just as a parlor trick, but as a tool to unlock the universe's secrets. By 1609, he was on the case, tinkering away like a mad scientist in his workshop. He managed to improve the magnification from a modest 3x to a staggering 20x. Imagine taking your smartphone camera from potato quality to HD overnight. That's the leap Galileo made, and it was nothing short of revolutionary. Armed with his souped-up telescope, Galileo turned his gaze skyward. He wasn't just stargazing for the sake of romance. He was on a mission to rewrite the celestial narrative. By January 1610, the cosmos started spilling its secrets. Galileo discovered 4 moons orbiting Jupiter: Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto. These weren't just any moons. They were the first objects found to be orbiting something other than Earth. It was like discovering your neighbor had a secret stash of the universe's best margaritas while you were sipping on lemonade. He named these moons the Medicean stars, after his patrons, the Medici family, which was a savvy move. In the cutthroat world of Renaissance Italy, having a wealthy and powerful family in your corner was worth its weight in gold. And let's be clear, Galileo needed all the allies he could muster. The Medici's support was both a political and economic boon, as it allowed him to continue his studies without the constant worry of how to pay the rent. Now, you might think, great, Galileo's a hero with a telescope, discovering moons and getting rich patrons. But hold your horses. This was 17th century Italy, where the church held sway over intellectual pursuits like a hawk over its prey. The political and religious landscape was a minefield, and Galileo was like a kid playing hopscotch in the middle of it. The church's doctrine was pretty clear. Earth was the center of the universe, a view that had Aristotle and Ptolemy's fingerprints all over it. Galileo's discoveries, suggesting otherwise, were about as welcome as a skunk at a garden party. In fact, Galileo found himself at the crossroads of science and faith, where economic and political pressures were as heavy as a barbell. The Italian states were a patchwork of city-states, each with its own ruler, who often had more interest in power and wealth than in the pursuit of knowledge. The Church, meanwhile, was the unyielding overlord of European thought, and it wasn't keen on anyone suggesting that maybe, just maybe, the Earth wasn't the VIP center of the universe. Galileo's telescope, then, was not just a tool for discovery, but a lightning rod for controversy. His findings challenged the Church's teachings, and by extension, its authority. It was like Galileo had shown up to a medieval feast with a vegan menu, sharking and sure to ruffle feathers. The stakes were high, and Galileo knew it. Yet he pressed on, driven by a thirst for knowledge that couldn't be quenched by fear of retribution. The real kicker, Galileo wasn't just fighting for scientific truth. He was battling for economic survival. In a world where academia was often funded by the wealthy and powerful, keeping the Medici family happy wasn't just a smart career move. It was essential for his livelihood. The economics of science in the 1600 were as complex as the heavens Galileo studied. Without patrons, his research would have stalled faster than a horse-drawn carriage in mud. Despite the challenges, Galileo's work in astronomy was nothing short of groundbreaking. His observations of Venus provided evidence that it, like Earth, orbited the Sun. This was another nail in the coffin for geocentrism, the belief that Earth was the universe's center stage. Galileo's findings were like a celestial soap opera, revealing that the heavens were far more dynamic and chaotic than anyone had imagined. Yet, his discoveries were also a reminder of the precarious balance between innovation and the status quo. The telescope, that simple tube of glass and metal, became a symbol of defiance and perseverance. It was a testament to human curiosity and the relentless pursuit of truth, even when the odds were stacked against you like a rigged deck of cards. Galileo's pioneering work in astronomy laid the groundwork for future generations, yet it also highlighted the economic and political realities that scientists faced. His story is a study in contrasts, brilliance and hardship, discovery and controversy. As he peered through his telescope, Galileo wasn't just looking at the stars. He was gazing into the abyss of human potential and the ever-present shadow of societal constraints. In the end, Galileo's telescopic revelations were both a triumph and a trial. His work sparked a scientific revolution, but also ignited a firestorm of debate that would rage for centuries. As we leave this chapter of Galileo's story, remember that the cosmos he uncovered was both a beacon of hope and a battleground for ideas. And while the stars may have been his guide, it was his unyielding spirit that truly set him apart. So, here's to Galileo, a man who dared to look beyond the horizon and remind us all that the universe is vast, and our understanding of it is ever-evolving. Stay tuned for more cosmic adventures in the next part of our tale. As Galileo's fame spread faster than a cat video on social media, he was about to learn that not everyone was thrilled with his cosmic discoveries. You see, while Galileo gazed at the stars, the Catholic Church was more concerned with keeping the Earth firmly at the center of the universe and its theology. Enter the year 1616, a time when the Church decided to put its foot down on the Copernican theory, treating it like a rebellious teenager who needed a curfew. This was the year when the Church issued a formal edict, essentially saying, "Hey, folks, this whole heliocentrism gig, not gonna fly around here." This wasn't just a memo that got lost in the ecclesiastical mailroom. No, this was the Church flexing its muscles, and Galileo was right in the crosshairs. The edict declared that the Copernican model, which proposed that the Earth orbited the Sun, was formally heretical. In church speak, that's about as serious as telling a medieval king he had a bad haircut. The stakes were high, and Galileo, ever the scientific crusader, found himself in a precarious position. But let's pause here for a second to appreciate the irony. The Church, which had been the bastion of knowledge, was now the gatekeeper against scientific progress. It was like watching the school librarians set fire to the books. Despite the warning, Galileo continued to champion heliocentrism. He wasn't just poking the bear, he was practically inviting it to dinner. In 1632, he published Dialogue concerning the two chief world systems, a book that cleverly presented arguments for both geocentrism and heliocentrism through a lively debate between three characters. The book was a masterstroke of diplomacy wrapped in a witty narrative. But let's not kid ourselves. Galileo's sympathies were as clear as a bell. His character Salviati, the voice of heliocentrism, was given all the best lines, while Simplicio, the advocate for geocentrism, was portrayed as, well, simple-minded. The book was a hit, but it was also a ticking time bomb. Galileo had underestimated the Church's reaction, which was about as cool as a volcano on the verge of eruption. By 1633, the Pope himself, Urban Roman VIII, who had once been a supporter of Galileo, felt personally affronted by the book. It was like Galileo had thrown the biggest bash of the century, invited everyone, and then forgotten to send the Pope a VIP pass. The Church wasn't just displeased, it was out for blood, or at least a very public apology. Enter the infamous trial of 1633, a spectacle that has been romanticized to the point where many imagine Galileo dramatically recanting his beliefs under the threat of torture. The reality, a bit less cinematic. While Galileo did face the Inquisition, the trial was more about public relations than actual punishment. The Church needed to send a message, and Galileo was the unfortunate messenger. He was found vehemently suspect of heresy, a charge that sounds serious, but was more like a stern wag of the finger. The punishment: he was forced to recant his support for heliocentrism and was sentenced to house arrest. Ah, the house arrest, a term that conjures images of dank cells and chains. But Galileo's confinement was more like being grounded in a mansion with room service. Sure, he couldn't leave, but he lived in comfort at his villa in Arcetri, near Florence, surrounded by lush gardens, and with a stunning view of the Tuscan countryside. Let's be honest, many of us wouldn't mind swapping places, especially during a lockdown. Galileo even had the company of his daughter, Maria Celeste, who was a nun and wrote to him frequently with updates and moral support. While he couldn't exactly host dinner parties, he continued his research and writing, which included his later work on the laws of motion. So, why does the myth of Galileo as a tortured martyr persist? It's simple. The drama of a scientific rebel standing against the monolithic Church is irresistible. It's the stuff of legends, but it overlooks the more nuanced reality. Galileo wasn't a lone wolf scientist battling the oppressive establishment. He was a shrewd academic navigating the treacherous waters of politics and religion, balancing his quest for knowledge with the practicalities of survival in a world where the Church held all the cards. Economically, Galileo's position was both a blessing and a curse. His association with the Medici family provided him with financial stability, but it also meant that he had to tread carefully. The Medici, influential as they were, couldn't protect him from the full force of the Church's displeasure. Galileo's trial was a stark reminder of the power dynamics at play, where even the brightest minds had to bow to the prevailing winds of authority. The trial and subsequent house arrest didn't just put Galileo on the historical map. They underscored the tension between scientific inquiry and religious doctrine, a theme that continues to resonate. Galileo's story is not just about a man who looked at the stars and dared to dream. It's about the complex interplay of power, knowledge, and the human spirit's relentless pursuit of truth. As we move forward, remember that Galileo's legacy isn't just written in the stars. It's etched in the very fabric of our understanding of the universe. And while this chapter of Galileo's life might seem like it ended with a whimper rather than a bang, it set the stage for the scientific revolution that would follow. His work laid the groundwork for future luminaries like Isaac Newton, who would take Galileo's observations and turn them into the laws of motion that govern our understanding of physics today. So, let's leave Galileo here, not as a defeated man under house arrest, but as a beacon of intellectual courage, ready for the next chapter of his cosmic journey. And trust me, the universe still has plenty of secrets to reveal. Stay tuned. As Galileo settled into his villa in Arcetri, it was clear that his house arrest wasn't going to be a retirement party with endless rounds of shuffleboard. Far from it. This was a man who, even in confinement, couldn't stop his brain from whirring like a hyperactive squirrel on caffeine. Galileo wasn't just lounging around. He was busy cooking up ideas that would eventually serve as the main course for future scientific heavyweights. You see, Galileo took this time to dive deeper into the world of motion and inertia, which, let's face it, is just a fancy way of saying he wanted to know why things moved the way they did, or didn't. This wasn't just some hobby to pass the time. It was foundational work in physics that would eventually give Isaac Newton the building blocks for his laws of motion. Galileo's insights on inertia were groundbreaking. He proposed that an object in motion stays in motion unless acted upon by an external force, a concept that seems as obvious now as the fact that pineapple on pizza is a contentious issue, but was revolutionary back then. Galileo's work on motion wasn't just theoretical musings scribbled in the margins of his books. He conducted experiments, the kind that would make a high school science teacher proud. Picture this: Galileo rolling balls down inclined planes, meticulously measuring their speed and acceleration. He was essentially turning his villa into the world's most sophisticated physics lab. It's like he was running a one-man science show, proving that you don't need a fancy university lab to make discoveries that would echo through the ages. But wait, there's more. Despite his legal constraints, Galileo wasn't isolated from the scientific community. He had a network of correspondence across Europe, effectively keeping the intellectual conversation alive through letters. Think of it as the 17th century version of a group chat, minus the GIF and emojis. These letters weren't just idle gossip. They were vital channels for exchanging ideas and theories. Galileo's correspondence with scientists like Johannes Kepler was crucial in spreading his ideas far and wide, despite the Church's best efforts to keep them under wraps. Speaking of the Church, they probably thought they had Galileo on a short leash. But in reality, his ideas were like dandelion seeds drifting across Europe, taking root in the minds of thinkers everywhere. The Church might have been able to contain Galileo, but his concepts were harder to pin down than a cat on a sugar high. His work on motion, for instance, was gaining traction in scientific circles, quietly undermining centuries of Aristotelian dogma that had been as unmovable as a granite statue. Galileo was essentially the silent revolutionary, orchestrating change from his villa with nothing more than pen, paper, and an indomitable spirit. Now, let's talk about the economic side of things, because, let's be honest, money makes the world go round, even when you're under house arrest. Galileo's financial situation was a mixed bag. His association with the Medici family meant he wasn't exactly counting pennies, but it wasn't all sunshine and lollipops either. The Medici patronage kept him afloat, offering a stipend that allowed him to continue his work without the constant worry of financial ruin. However, this support came with strings attached. The Medici were politically astute and weren't keen on being associated with a man too controversial for his own good. Galileo had to tread carefully, ensuring his work didn't put his patrons in hot water with the Church. Despite these challenges, Galileo's reputation as a scientific trailblazer continued to grow. His concepts of motion and inertia were like the forbidden fruit of the scientific world, irresistible and ripe for the picking. Scientists across Europe were intrigued by his theories and began to build upon them, setting the stage for the scientific revolution that was waiting just around the corner. The spread of Galileo's ideas wasn't just about scientific curiosity. It was also about the shifting tides of political and intellectual power. Europe was undergoing a transformation, with the rise of nation-states and the gradual erosion of the Church's absolute authority over knowledge. Galileo was part of this seismic shift, a beacon of reason in an age slowly waking up to the power of empirical evidence over dogma. Yet, even as his ideas were gaining traction, Galileo knew he was playing a high-stakes game. The Church was not a fan of dissent, especially from a man who had the audacity to suggest that the Earth wasn't the universe's VIP section. Galileo's trial and house arrest had been a stark reminder of the delicate balance he had to maintain between scientific inquiry and the Church's dogged grip on intellectual life. In his later years, Galileo's health began to decline. By 1637, he was virtually blind, a cruel twist of fate for a man whose vision had once pierced the heavens. But even blindness couldn't dim his intellectual fire. He continued to write, dictating his thoughts to students and family members, ensuring his legacy wouldn't be buried under the weight of his physical limitations. Galileo's final major work, discourses and mathematical demonstrations relating to two new sciences, was smuggled out of Italy and published in the Netherlands in 1638. This was a place where the intellectual climate was a bit more forgiving and the Church's reach wasn't as long. It's as if Galileo's ideas were determined to find daylight, no matter how many obstacles were thrown in their path. This last work encapsulated Galileo's groundbreaking studies on motion and strength of materials, further cementing his place as one of the giants of science. It was a testament to his perseverance and intellect, a final salvo in his lifelong quest to understand the natural world. And while he may have been confined to his villa, his influence was anything but constrained. Galileo's work continued to inspire new generations of scientists who would carry the torch of discovery into the future. So, as we leave this chapter of Galileo's story, let's remember that his later years were not a period of decline, but a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. Galileo's legacy is a reminder that even when the odds are stacked against you, the pursuit of truth is a journey worth taking. Stay tuned, because the scientific revolution he helped ignite is just getting started. As Galileo's story unfolded, it was clear that his legacy, much like his vision, was destined to stretch far beyond his own lifetime. This wasn't just about a man who peeked through a telescope and saw moons dancing around Jupiter. It was about how those observations shook the very foundations of what humanity thought it knew about its place in the cosmos. You see, Galileo's work wasn't just a splash in the pond. It was a tidal wave that set the stage for scientific revolution. His ideas were the precursors to modern physics and astronomy, paving the way for giants like Isaac Newton, who would take Galileo's musings on motion and transform them into the bedrock principles of classical mechanics. Newton, the apple guy, wasn't just standing on the shoulders of giants. He was climbing all over Galileo's contributions. The concept of inertia, which Galileo wrestled with while rolling balls down plains in his Tuscan villa, was the very starting point for Newton's laws of motion. Without Galileo asking why things fall and why they keep moving, Newton might not have had the launch pad he needed for his own theories of gravity. It's like the scientific equivalent of Galileo handing Newton a set of keys and saying, "Here, take it for a spin." But let's not sugarcoat it. Galileo's story has been romanticized to the point where many picture him as a lone wolf scientist, battling the oppressive forces of the church with nothing but his telescope and a snappy comeback. The reality, a bit more nuanced. Galileo wasn't a rebel without a cause. He was a savvy intellectual navigating a perilous landscape of politics and dogma. Sure, he challenged the church's geocentric model, but he did so with the strategic mind of a chess player anticipating the next move. It wasn't just about looking at the stars. It was about ensuring those discoveries didn't land him in a cell with a view of the gallows. Galileo's life was a delicate dance, where each step had to be measured against the backdrop of a powerful institution that wasn't exactly known for its open-mindedness. Yet, despite the trials and tribulations, Galileo's enduring influence is undeniable. His work laid the foundation for the scientific method, a systematic approach to inquiry that prioritized observation and evidence over blind adherence to tradition. This was a seismic shift from the Aristotelian mindset that had dominated for centuries, where the only thing more rigid than the theories was the dogma backing them. Galileo's insistence on experimentation and proof was like a breath of fresh air in a room that hadn't seen a window opened in generations. In popular culture, Galileo's story has taken on a life of its own. He's often portrayed as the quintessential scientific hero, the poster child for the conflict between reason and faith. Plays, books, and films have all taken their turn at telling his tale, sometimes with more dramatic flair than historical accuracy. Who could resist the drama of a man standing alone against the might of the Catholic Church? It's practically Shakespearean. Yet, this narrative can obscure the fact that Galileo wasn't entirely alone. He had allies, patrons, and a network of correspondents who shared his thirst for knowledge. Today, Galileo is celebrated not just as a pioneer of science, but as a symbol of intellectual courage. His story resonates because it speaks to the universal human struggle between curiosity and conformity, between innovation and the status quo. In a world where ideas can be as dangerous as they are revolutionary, Galileo's life reminds us that the pursuit of truth often comes with a price. Yet, it's a price worth paying, for the rewards of discovery are as vast as the universe itself. So, what should we take away from Galileo's journey? First, that science is a collective effort, building upon the insights of those who came before. Galileo's contributions were crucial, but they were part of a continuum that stretches from the ancient Greeks to the present day. Second, that the tension between science and social institutions is nothing new. Whether it's the church in Galileo's time or modern debates over climate change and vaccines, the clash between evidence and belief continues to shape our world. Finally, let's not forget the economic dimension of Galileo's story. The patronage system that supported his work was a double-edged sword, providing the financial backing necessary for his research, while also imposing constraints on his freedom. In many ways, it's a precursor to the funding challenges faced by scientists today, where research must often align with the priorities of those holding the purse strings. As we wrap up our tale, let's raise a toast to Galileo Galilei, a man who dared to look beyond the horizon, and in doing so, expanded the boundaries of human knowledge. His legacy is a testament to the power of perseverance, creativity, and a little bit of rebellion. And as we continue to explore the cosmos, we owe a nod to the man who first turned his gaze skyward and asked, "What if?" So, here's to Galileo, a beacon of reason in a world that could always use a little more light.